Our story begins during the college entrance exams, where Chun Fan intentionally answered every bonus question correctly just to distance himself from the school belle, Lu Rian. As he left the exam hall, Rian's friends began to mock him, telling him that since Rian felt she did poorly, he had better leave his afternoon paper blank. They laughed, claiming he'd lose his chance to worship her otherwise. Chun Fan looked at the disgusted expression on Rian's face and simply nodded, saying he understood. Deep down, however, he was done being her lapdog and decided he wouldn't serve her for another second. He immediately called his housekeeper to take action. He ordered all financial aid to her family canceled and had them evicted. Soon after, a frantic Rian tried calling him 99 times in a desperate rage. He didn't pick up a single call. She was anxious now, but it was far too late. In his past life, as the son of the wealthiest man, he had been obsessed. He had pathetically chased the daughter of his family's driver, even transferring his father's company to her just to marry her, only for her to spend his money on someone else. She treated her actual boyfriend like a spoiled prince while running Chun Fan like a common servant. To be honest, it was a miserable existence. On her wedding day, he called her to borrow money for medical treatment, but she cruelly told him that the years he spent clinging to her were a nightmare. She demanded he stay away from her forever. As he lay dying, he saw a woman holding him and realized the wealthy socialite he once rejected had been waiting all along. When he opened his eyes again, we find him back in his senior year of high school. He was napping at his desk when the treacherous Rian woke him up. She told him that Lu Jinyan's stomach was upset and ordered him to go buy medicine immediately, which, naturally, was just the beginning of her demands. She told him to get extra meat from the cafeteria because Jinyan was too thin and needed nourishment. Jinyan was currently slumped over her desk, surrounded by classmates. The whole group was fussing over Jinyan's stomach ache, acting as though it were a tragedy, yet the person who usually cared for her the most was Chun Fan. In the past, he would spend every break getting her food and running errands. Realizing he had been reborn, Chun Fan looked at Rian's face and found it utterly ridiculous. He wondered why he had ever allowed her to treat him so poorly. Seeing him hesitate, Rian snapped, asking why he was just standing there instead of hurrying. She then turned to Jinyan and gently patted her back. At that moment, Jinyan glanced at him and suggested it wasn't right to make Chun Fan go. Rian dismissed the concern, claiming he loved doing these things and would be unhappy if he wasn't allowed to serve. A bold claim, to say the least. She looked at him for confirmation. He simply twitched the corner of his mouth and headed to the cafeteria without saying a single word. She believed elite people wouldn't look at someone like him, viewing him as nothing more than the son of a servant meant to follow her every whim. They mocked him, asking if he really fantasized about marrying the young mistress just because they went to school together. To them, he was just a talentless boy. They claimed he was destined to be her servant, washing her clothes and changing her son's diapers. Chun Fan could only laugh at the sheer absurdity of it all. He asked if Lu Rian had really told them he was the son of a servant. In truth, he only let her ride in his private car because he liked her. But now, in everyone's eyes, Rian was the high-class lady while he was the lowly help. When he questioned this, the girl simply rolled her eyes at him. She told him to stop talking and hurry up with the young mistress's lunch before it got cold. As she spoke, she began to laugh once more. Soon, everyone around them was laughing at his pathetic devotion and his supposed delusions. When the bell finally rang, we see him leaving the cafeteria. Instead of returning to class, he sat by the flower beds and began to eat both portions of the food himself. It was a rare moment of peace. He couldn't even remember the last time he'd had a proper meal. In his past life of poverty, he could only afford scraps left over at the market. Meat had been an unthinkable luxury back then. Only after finishing both meals did the gnawing sensation of hunger finally begin to fade away. By the time he returned to the classroom, the first bell had already rung. Rian looked up, visibly annoyed by his late arrival. She demanded to know why he took so long and asked for the medicine. He looked at her coldly, devoid of his usual warmth and adoration. Rian was speechless, snapping at him to hand over the stomach medicine for Lu Jinyan. She asked if he was deaf or just incompetent. Chun Fan glanced at the pale Jinyan and calmly asked why he should be the one buying medicine for her. They were, after all, practically strangers. Jinyan came from a modest background, but Rian had been strangely generous to her ever since they met. Generous with Chun Fan's things, that is. Whenever his father gave him something nice, Rian would immediately hand it over to Jinyan. Even the watch on Jinyan's wrist belonged to him. These two were living off his money and enjoying his life, yet they treated him like a common errand boy. It was a truly bizarre dynamic. Rian threatened that if he kept acting out, she would stop talking to him entirely. She warned him not to come crawling back later, begging for forgiveness. He stared at her, finding her arrogance almost comical. He asked her quite simply what he could possibly have done that required her forgiveness. The rest of the class turned to watch, stunned that he actually dared to talk back to her. It seemed the local lapdog had finally grown some teeth. Rian was momentarily stunned, remembering how he used to plead for her attention. She told him that if he was so brave, he should just leave. He simply nodded and agreed to go home with her, then walked to his seat and sat down. It was as if he hadn't even heard the rest of what Rian was saying. Seeing this, Jinyan's seatmate, Wang Yin, decided it was time to step in and deliver some justice of her own. To be honest, she was looking for a fight. She demanded to know what was wrong with him, snapping that he couldn't even manage to buy a simple bottle of medicine. Didn't he see that Jinyan was unwell? Chen Fan didn't flinch. He merely gave her a cold, sweeping glance that made her pause for a moment. He asked why on earth he should buy anything for Jinyan, since they weren't related. Wang Yin pointed a finger, calling him nothing more than the young mistress's servant. She claimed it was only natural for him to buy medicine for the mistress's friends. Hearing this, he turned his gaze toward Rian, wondering if she was the source of these rumors. He looked her directly in the eye and asked if she was the one telling everyone he was her servant. For a brief second, Rian actually looked guilty. We see that people had simply assumed his status because she arrived in luxury cars every day. She never bothered to correct them, of course. She could never admit the truth, that her father was just a driver, and she was the driver's daughter. She sighed, telling him to forget the medicine and she'd buy it herself. She assumed he was just jealous and didn't want to help Jinyan. She looked at him again, asking if he had at least brought the lunch she asked for. She had heard from other students that he'd bought 2 portions of food. He calmly replied that he had already eaten. "What did you say?" she stammered. He nodded, confirming he had eaten both portions himself. The students sitting in front of him turned around, their faces twisted with utter disdain. They called him a pig, mocking him for eating 2 whole meals. They were quite used to flattering Rian and looking down on him. After all, in the past, he had always been polite to them for Rian's sake, hoping they would speak well of him to her. He didn't want to offend anyone in her circle. Now he realized he had simply spoiled them far too much. Ironically, every time Rian treated them to a meal, she was actually spending his money. He told them that since it was his own money, he could eat 20 portions if he felt like it. It was, as he put it, perfectly natural. The students' faces darkened at his words. One of them whispered that his money probably came from the young mistress's family anyway. He didn't even bother to explain the truth to them. Beside him, Rian was growing furious, especially since he hadn't brought her any food and she was starving. Her temper finally boiled over. She turned to him, her voice sharp as she called out his name, Chen Fan. She turned to Wang Yin and told her they were switching seats. This was her favorite way to punish him whenever she was displeased. This was her usual punishment, refusing to sit with him. After all, he had practically begged for her to be his seatmate since she was technically his tutor. Sitting by his side, she was supposed to help him study. But looking back, Rian had never actually taught him a single lesson. Instead, she spent every day simply ordering him around. She seemed to think this cold shoulder would intimidate him, but he ignored her completely. Rian was hungry, and Jinyan was still suffering from his stomach ache. As she sat there with a darkened expression, she shot a glare at him by the window. This time, Rian was truly furious. She told herself that when he eventually came to apologize, she would make him regret his behavior. Later, after school, the Maybach arrived to pick him up. The luxury car waited at the gate, and he walked straight toward it. By now, the entire school knew he had offended Rian, and they were all waiting to see him humiliated. Seeing him have the nerve to approach the car, they began pointing and whispering. Didn't he refuse to even buy the school beauty a meal? They wondered how he could still shamelessly hitch a ride in her family's car. To them, he was just a servant's son who had forgotten his place. They mocked him for getting in before Rian even arrived, claiming that Rian was simply far too kind-hearted for her own good. Once inside the car, he looked at the driver and gave a simple command, "Drive." The driver glanced back, noting that Miss Rian hadn't arrived yet, and suggested they wait. Usually, Rian was late due to student council duties, and he would always wait for her. It was his habit, after all. The driver expected another long wait today and was surprised by the sudden order to leave. When the driver hesitated and tried to speak up for Rian, Chen Fan found the situation utterly absurd. He reminded Uncle Lu that his father only had one son, asking where this young mistress had come from. Uncle Lu asked if he'd had a fight with Rian, promising to scold her later. "No need," he replied coldly. "Just drive. I don't want to travel with her anymore." He added that he didn't want to see her at all. Uncle Lu hesitated, ignoring the command. He knew all too well how much the boy usually feared his daughter's temper. In the past, he never dared to talk back to Rian. The driver assumed that even if he ignored the boy now, the worst that would happen was a lecture from Rian. Thinking about how his daughter would eventually control the family fortune, the driver had stopped seeing himself as a mere employee. To be honest, he was getting ahead of himself. He began putting on the airs of a future father-in-law. Chen Fan frowned, asking one last time if he was going to drive. Actually, his father had wanted to fire the man long ago. There were rumors he was embezzling, and his father felt it was unsafe to keep such a person in the house. But back then, Chen Fan's mind had been clouded. He had constantly defended the driver, thinking that if the father stayed, Rian would be able to stay in the Chun household too. She had said so many kind things, claiming she was treated exceptionally well, which was the only reason this driver was still employed. Yet now he was actually refusing to listen to the words of his own master. Just then, seeing Rian appear at the school gate, Uncle Lu quickly hopped out of the car to greet her. Rian was supporting Jinyan as they walked toward the vehicle together. Uncle Lu hurried to open the door for her, and Rian immediately prepared to help Jinyan inside. Because Chen Fan had been so infatuated with Rian, he used to insist they all travel together, meaning the driver always took the same route. In the past, the driver would drop Jinyan off first before finally taking Chen Fan home. Not only that, he'd have to wake up early every morning just to picked Jinyan up first. Before Jinyan could step inside, Chun Fan spoke up, asking why he was trying to get in when he'd said they weren't traveling together. The students watching this scene couldn't help but start cursing Chun Fan. They wondered what was wrong with him, assuming this was clearly the school beauty's car. They mocked him for acting like a master, thinking it was generous enough of her to let him hitch a ride. Yet here he was, trying to bar her from her own car. As the crowd whispered, Rian's expression stiffened. She couldn't understand what had gotten into him today, especially since he refused to take the exit she'd offered. She asked if he really had to be this way, claiming she wasn't even angry about the afternoon anymore and had decided to forgive him. She asked if he truly wanted to keep making a scene. He told her he didn't need her forgiveness and that she should just find her own way home. Rian's face turned pale, then flushed with anger. She was trapped. She knew everyone saw her as a wealthy heiress, and if she didn't get into this car now, her true identity as a driver's daughter would be exposed. In a desperate move, she reached out and physically pulled Chun Fan out of the car, letting Jinyan take his seat instead. He told her she was going too far. He had to admit, her audacity actually managed to provoke him. He couldn't remember much of the past, but seeing Rian's true colors now, he wondered how he had ever endured her behavior or thought she was a good person. Rian ignored him completely, clearly having no intention of being reasonable. She simply told her father to drive, and Uncle Lu actually sped away, leaving Chun Fan standing there on the curb. The onlookers, seeing this, burst into spontaneous laughter. They cheered, thinking he deserved it for being so unreasonable to her. Left alone, he pulled out his phone. It was a cheap Nokia worth a few $100 that Rian had bought him. To please her, he had given her the expensive smartphone his father gave him for his birthday. He had taken this piece of junk instead, thinking it would protect her pride. Looking at the broken thing now, he found his past self quite pathetic. He decided to call his father. Not long after the call, the Maybach that had just driven away suddenly came crawling back. The car pulled up at the gate once more, and Uncle Lu stepped out with a look of pure dread. To be honest, he looked like a man who had just been thoroughly scolded. Chun Fan told him to get those two out of the car, as he had no intention of sharing a ride with them. Uncle Lu could only turn his gaze toward the two passengers. Rian helped Jinyan out of the vehicle, and Jinyan, clearly not expecting this turn of events, watched as his face grew paler by the second. He finally spoke up. He told Chun Fan that while it was fine to dislike him, there was no need to target Rian like this, especially since she had always been so kind. Rian immediately stopped Jinyan, telling him not to waste his breath. Once the two of them were out, Chun Fan finally climbed into the car. Before leaving, he rolled down the window, waving goodbye to Rian with a mocking smile. Uncle Lu watched him through the rearview mirror, stunned that the young master would act with such cold finality. The driver couldn't help but speak up, suggesting that arguments are normal and that he shouldn't be so angry. He even offered to have Rian apologize later. He worried that since she had no car now, she would be forced to take the bus, and who knew what time she would finally make it home. A tragic fate, indeed. Chun Fan simply asked if she was too good for the bus when everyone else used it. He then reminded Uncle Lu exactly who paid his salary. We see the power shift. He suggested that if Uncle Lu didn't like his attitude, he was free to resign. It seems the driver had forgotten his place just because Chun Fan once liked his daughter. Hearing those words, Uncle Lu shut his mouth in a hurry, terrified. When they arrived home, the butler, Zhou Shun, was surprised to see Chun Fan standing there alone. He asked why the young master had returned without Miss Rian. Chun Fan coldly informed him that, from now on, there was no Miss Rian in this house. Zhou Shun stood there in a daze, realizing his young master had finally woken up. Chun Fan had been so obsessed with her that the Lu family had forgotten who the real masters were. Many times, Zhou Shun had wanted to speak up, but he never dared because he knew it would only make Chun Fan angry. Now, hearing this, he felt a deep sense of relief. He looked at Chun Fan with genuine emotion. He was the most loyal servant in the house, yet in the past, Chun Fan had resented him for constantly questioning Rian's actions. In his previous life, once Rian took over the household, Zhou Shun was the very first person she kicked out. Remembering all of this, Chun Fan felt a wave of regret. Looking at the loyal butler now, his eyes grew misty. He told Zhou Shun he was going upstairs, but the butler mentioned that Miss Li had come by and he'd sent her away. In truth, Li Xia came by often, but because she was the woman his father had arranged for him, Chun Fan had always found her presence incredibly annoying. He used to be so irritated by her that he wouldn't even see her, ordering the staff to send her away immediately. Consequently, they had barely ever met face to face. He remembered that at the very end of his past life, it was her people who took him to the hospital, and yet, even then, she had still cared for him. Remembering that she was actually his fiancée, Chun Fan stopped Zhou Shun and asked where she was. It turned out she was in the backyard playing with Dabai. When he reached the backyard, we see Li Xia feeding Dabai. Chun Fan had bought this dog himself, but because Rian said she disliked dogs, he had stopped going near it. He hadn't expected that Li Xia would actually get along so well with Dabai. He recalled hearing rumors before his death about her life in the years that followed. Despite her beauty and status, she had remained single for many years, and thinking of this, his eyes grew red. Li Xia finished petting Dabai before finally looking up. She saw him standing at the door, unsure of how long he had been watching. She started to walk toward him, but then remembered how much he supposedly detested her. She stopped in her tracks and addressed him formally as young Master Chun. Li Xia was beautiful but possessed a steady, mature personality beyond her years. Though she was his age, she had the composed air of someone much older. Her academic record was top tier, making her the person Rian envied and disliked the most. Rian always claimed that Xia was only successful because her family provided so many resources. She often complained that if she had the same advantages, she would be just as elite. It was a classic case of resentment, really. Chen Fan realized they had never truly interacted, so she had never actually offended him. He struggled to keep his emotions in check as he asked if she needed something. She simply said she wanted to see him. When he didn't immediately respond, she assumed he was annoyed and quickly added that she knew he didn't want her there. She turned to leave, having only expected to see the dog. She never imagined he would actually agree to see her, which, for her, was already more than enough. Seeing her about to depart, Chen Fan spoke up and asked if she would like to stay for dinner. To be honest, this was the last thing she expected to hear. Li Xia froze in shock, looking at him with utter disbelief as she asked if it was truly okay. At that moment, the setting sun bathed him in a warm, gentle light. He assured her it was fine. Meanwhile, Rian had not yet returned, as she was busy escorting Jinyan home. In the past, things would have been very different. Previously, he would have insisted on waiting for Rian before starting the meal. Seeing him ready to eat so early, Zhou Shun was surprised and asked if they should wait. Chen Fan simply asked why they would wait for her, since the staff were so used to him acting like Rian's loyal servant. His sudden change in attitude was quite jarring. Zhou Shun didn't press the matter and went to make the arrangements. Chen Fan then added that Uncle Lu didn't need to come back to work starting tomorrow. The butler was stunned for a moment but quickly recovered, knowing better than to question his master. After dismissing Rian's father, Chen Fan sat down in the dining room. Li Xia had been stealing glances at him, but as soon as he sat down, she became visibly restless and self-conscious. It was a very different atmosphere than before. She quickly looked away, and we see that Chen Fan hadn't expected Li Xia to be so innocent. He couldn't resist the urge to tease her, asking why she wouldn't look at him. He jokingly asked if he was that hard to look at. While his grades were poor, he was quite handsome, and if he hadn't been ruined by Lu Rian in his past life, he never would have fallen so low. She looked at him with a calm face and said no, but if one looked closely, her ears were turning bright red. Chen Fan smiled and mentioned he'd heard her grades were always excellent. Facing his sudden warmth, Li Xia felt a bit out of her element. She modestly replied that they were okay. He then asked if she could recommend any reliable tutors, since relying on Lu Rian was no longer an option. In this life, he had no intention of repeating his past mistake of thinking his father could protect him forever while he neglected his studies. He wanted to catch up while he still had the chance. Since Li Xia had access to the best resources, any teacher she recommended would surely be effective. She was surprised he was looking for a tutor and asked about Lu Rian. It turns out Rian had been staying at his house under the guise of being his classmate and tutor. He explained that Rian had been fired. In truth, she looked down on him and never had the patience to actually teach him anything. All the money he had paid her in the past had essentially been thrown away. Li Xia was quite surprised, but seeing that he was being serious and not joking, she took a sip from her glass to hide her nervousness. She admitted that she didn't actually have any tutors herself. She was entirely self-taught. She told him that if he didn't mind, she could come over every day to tutor him personally. To be honest, she expected him to refuse. After all, he used to barely even glance at her. The fact that he had invited her to dinner was already a shock, but then she saw his reaction to her offer. To her surprise, Chen Fan looked absolutely delighted. Li Xia nodded, feeling deeply moved, and promised she would help him as long as he was willing. He agreed immediately, though he worried about interrupting her own studies. She quickly assured him that it wouldn't be a problem at all. While her face remained composed, her eyes were incredibly gentle. She had actually finished the high school curriculum long ago and already had a guaranteed university spot. She kept that a secret, however, fearing it might annoy him. He thanked her, jokingly asking her not to lose heart since he considered himself a bit slow. Lu Rian also had good grades, but she had zero patience. If he didn't understand a problem after one explanation, she would immediately start insulting him. His grades had once been average, but under Rian's tutoring, they had actually regressed until he lost all confidence. Xia promised that wouldn't happen. She suggested coming over right after school. As they ate together in a quiet, peaceful atmosphere, Chen Fan reached out and placed some food on her plate. He told her to make herself at home and not be a stranger. It was at that exact moment that Lu Rian, who had just finished walking Lu Jingyan home, walked in. She had just received the news that her father had been fired, and he had given her quite a scolding. Seeing Chen Fan eating without waiting for her, and seeing the food on the table, already cold, her face immediately darkened with displeasure. Chen Fan gave her a cold, indifferent look and simply continued eating. Originally, Rian had intended to ask him about her father's situation, but seeing Li Xia there, she asked irritably what she was doing in the house. In the past, he had always avoided other girls just to please her. Every time Xia had come over, he wouldn't even look at her before directly chasing her away. Rian never expected him to actually invite the girl to stay for dinner. He simply replied that she was his guest and asked if Rian had a problem with that. Rian had no choice but to sit down, staring at him. She accused him of calling Xia over just to make her jealous. Xia sat nearby, Remaining silent, Chen Fan looked at Ruyan and told her she was overthinking it. She simply wasn't that important. In his previous life, he thought this woman was his entire world, and everything he did revolved around her. But having a second chance, he now felt nothing but disgust and contempt. To be honest, he'd seen enough. Continuing to love someone like her would only lead his life back into an endless abyss. Rian scoffed, saying that if he thought being with other girls would make her angry, he was sorely mistaken. She claimed she'd be happy to see him with someone else. If only so he would stop bothering her every day. After saying her piece, she went straight upstairs to her room. Chen Fan was left speechless. Once Rian was gone, we see that Shia's expression across the table had become quite complicated. He worried she might have taken Rian's nonsense to heart and felt a bit uneasy. To his surprise, Shia didn't say a single word about it. Her attitude seemed to have turned somewhat cold. After finishing dinner, he walked Shia to the door and told her to be careful on the way home. She left with a simple okay, barely speaking to him at all. When he returned inside, Ruyan was coming back down the stairs. Although she would go on to do many terrible things, her face was undeniably beautiful, giving her a gentle and quiet appearance. In the past, he had been completely fooled by this facade. Now, Ruyan confronted him, demanding to know why he had fired her father. She hadn't brought this up in front of Shia because she didn't want anyone to know that she was actually just the daughter of the Chun family's driver. Making a scene in front of Shia would have cost her too much face. Chun Fan asked why he owed her an explanation for firing a driver. She snapped that he was her father and that everything that happened today was her doing, so he should take it out on her instead. She challenged him, telling him to just go ahead and fire her too. At the mere mention of firing her, Chun Fan felt a sudden surge of energy as he stared at Ruyan. He agreed without hesitation, which left Rian staring at him in utter shock. He reminded her that she had always considered him foolish anyway. Since that was the case, he told her they were finished. He ordered her to move out of his house, stating he would find a different tutor. After all, since she started, his grades had actually gotten worse. He told her plainly that she wasn't worth the high salary he paid her. Rian initially thought he was just joking, but she soon realized he was serious about dismissing her as his tutor. She snapped back, claiming his poor grades were simply because he was too dim-witted to keep up. She pointed out that when she explained a problem to Lu Jingyan once, he understood immediately. But as for Chen Fan, well, she claimed he was as dense as a pig and that it wasn't her fault. She insisted that even with another teacher, the result would be the same because no one could teach him more. It was entirely his own problem, she argued. Seeing her still trying to shift the blame onto him, he simply repeated his order for her to move out. Rian frowned deeply. She lectured him, saying he was still a student and should focus on his studies, which was why his grades were so poor. She asked what he was even talking about. She dismissed his actions as petty tricks born of jealousy over her close relationship with Lu Jingyan. She assumed he was just in a bad mood, but claimed that for now, she only wanted to focus on her studies to get into a prestigious university. She noted that unlike him, who had more than enough family money, even without an education, she had to work hard. Therefore, she told him it was impossible for them to be together right now. Chen Fan stared at her, genuinely stunned. After a few seconds, he finally reacted, asking who on earth ever said they wanted to be with her. He wondered where Rian got such incredible confidence. He asked if she truly believed he wanted her, noting that without his interest, she was nobody. Rian just assumed he was being stubborn and told him to think what he liked. However, she warned him that if he invited Li Xia over for dinner again, he shouldn't blame her for ignoring him. After saying her piece, she walked straight back to her room and slammed the door shut. Once back in his own room, Chun Fan called Zhou Shun. He instructed Zhou that by tomorrow, all of Rian's things should be moved out. His home had no room for someone trying to walk all over him. Then, he saved Li Xia's number in his phone. He sent her a quick message asking if she had made it home safely, but she didn't reply. The next morning, we see that he finally got to sleep in. Since he no longer had to pick up Lu Jingyan, he woke up naturally. He had assumed Rian would be gone by now, but to his surprise, when he got out of bed, he found her sitting at the dining table waiting for him. He simply found a spot, sat down, and began enjoying his breakfast. Usually, he'd be rushing to pick up Lu Jingyan. He realized he had almost never enjoyed a proper breakfast at home before, yet here was Rian, waiting for him. She even went as far as opening the car door for him. As he sat down, Rian followed him inside, prompting him to look at her. He asked what she was doing, reminding her she had claimed they weren't traveling together anymore. He remembered her words quite clearly. Rian remained silent, though deep down, she was only doing this because her father insisted she appease him. To her, he was just a rich bully. She felt his wealth was nothing special, but her father needed the job. Chen Fan, not wanting to waste time, simply told the driver to go. When they arrived at the school gates, Chen Fan stepped out with Rian trailing behind him. Usually, they would have arrived with Lu Jingyan in tow, but today, Jingyan had to take the bus. Seeing Rian, he quickly hurried over to meet them. Jingyan's gaze fell on Chen Fan. After yesterday's scene, he was confused as to why a mere servant's son dared to be so arrogant toward Rian. Seeing them arrive together, he asked if they had made up. Chen Fan didn't even bother to acknowledge them and walked straight inside. Rian watched his retreating back, her brow furrowing at his complete lack of interest in her. She turned to Lu Jingyan with a sigh. She claimed she didn't want to argue with him, but Jingyan remarked that her temper was far too good to let a servant's son bully her. He noted that everyone was now gossiping about Chen Fan being the real young master. Rian told him not to mind their opinions. She explained that since her father was on good terms with Chen Fan, she had been asked to look after him and couldn't just ignore him. Hearing that she was only acting this way because of her father, Lu Jingyan felt a sense of relief. Meanwhile, Chen Fan reached his classroom. Wang Yin was already there, blocking his way. When he told her to move, she looked at him and called him utterly shameless. She criticized him for abandoning the school beauty and Lu Jingyan yesterday while he drove off in the car. Chen Fan just chuckled. He pointed out that since it was his car, he had every right to decide who rode in it. He asked her who she thought she was to interfere. His confident attitude made the surrounding students curious. Someone asked if that Maybach really belonged to his family. Chen Fan gave a cool look to the speaker, but Wang Yin burst into laughter. She claimed they all knew exactly who he was. She mocked him, asking if he really had the right to play the young master when his own father was just a driver for the Lu family. Wang Yin continued her tirade, claiming that Rian was only being kind by not kicking him out and warned him not to push his luck. Since Wang Yin was close to Lu Jingyan, and he was always with Rian, the surrounding students naturally began to believe her words. Just then, Rian and Lu Jingyan appeared at the classroom door. Rian's expression was stiff, looking rather uncomfortable with the scene. She realized Wang Yan's insults toward Chen Fan were actually reflecting poorly on her. She walked over and firmly told Wang Yin to return to her seat. Wang Yin shot a helpless glance at Rian, sensing her genuine displeasure, and reluctantly moved her things away from Chen Fan's desk. Rian took her seat next to Chen Fan once again. He, however, didn't pay her much attention as he simply didn't care about her actions anymore. As a favorite among the teachers with excellent social standing, no one would question Rian's choice of seating. Meanwhile, Wang Yin was fuming. Sitting next to Lu Jingyan, Wang Yin whispered her frustration, asking him why on earth the school beauty was still protecting Chen Fan. She couldn't understand why Rian was tolerating Chen Fan's arrogance. Lu Jingyan explained that her father had simply asked her to look after him. He told her not to overthink it. Wang Yin sighed in relief, mocking Chen Fan's earlier claim that the luxury car belonged to his family. She pointed out that Rian's expensive phone and gifts proved her status, while Chen Fan's phone was as cheap as her own. To her, the idea of him being a rich young master was a joke. Meanwhile, Chen Fan sat quietly at his desk and checked his phone. Li Xia had finally replied, but it was just a single, cold letter. It was a stark contrast to her friendly demeanor from the day before. He couldn't help but notice how distant she had become since returning home. It had taken her nearly an entire day just to send that one character. Rian, sitting right beside him, caught a glimpse of the message from Li Xia. She couldn't help but frown at what she saw. To Rian, Chen Fan looked the same, yet since yesterday, he felt like a completely different person, someone she no longer understood. Chen Fan ignored the tension and texted Xia back, asking if she was still coming for the afternoon tutoring session. Her reply was equally brief. She simply confirmed she would be there. Putting the matter aside, Chen Fan spent the morning focusing intensely on his lessons. At lunchtime, Lu Jingyan came to take Rian to eat. She glanced at Chen Fan, surprised by his focus, and asked if he was going to join them. His sudden diligence was almost magical to her. He hadn't even dozed off once. He remained at his desk, carefully organizing his notes as never before. It was almost a joke to her. The boy whose mind was usually filled only with thoughts of her was actually studying. Seeing him still busy after class, Rian couldn't help but feel intrigued. She asked him a question out of curiosity, but he acted as if he hadn't heard a single word, ignoring her completely. Lu Jingyan glanced at Rian and spoke up. He suggested that if Chen Fan wasn't going, they should just go themselves and perhaps bring something back for him. But Chen Fan simply declined the offer. Lu Jingyan was a good person, at least that was how everyone saw him. Even when others mocked him behind his back, he maintained a positive and optimistic attitude. However, Chen Fan had no intention of owing anyone any favors. He neatly organized his belongings, stood up, and prepared to head out on his own. He didn't join them as he walked downstairs. Lu Jingyan followed beside Rian, wondering aloud what was wrong with him and why he was suddenly ignoring her. Rian was equally puzzled. She couldn't understand it. Usually, no matter how cold she was, he would always follow her around like a loyal little puppy. Yet since yesterday, even though she hadn't changed her behavior, he remained distant. It was, to be honest, a truly confusing state of affairs for her. Lu Jingyan then asked if they should invite him to her birthday party this weekend. As it happened, Rian's birthday was fast approaching. Last year, her party was held at the Huangting Hotel. Chen Fan had booked the venue and arranged everything, allowing Rian to invite all her classmates. He had spent hundreds of thousands in a single night, and the students who attended couldn't stop praising the event. To them, attending her party was a great honor. This year was expected to be the same. In fact, days ago, Chen Fan had already made all the necessary arrangements for the celebration. If he hadn't mentioned firing her, Rian wouldn't have thought much of it. But after his words yesterday and his coldness today, she couldn't help but overthink. She wondered if the party would even happen if he didn't show up. Watching his retreating figure, Rian tried to reassure herself. She told herself there was no need to worry. Surely he would come. She couldn't imagine him simply ignoring her birthday after everything. Perhaps, she thought, he was being cold on purpose just to surprise her later. With that thought, she felt a bit more relaxed. She told Lu Jingyan that he would definitely be there. After all, he had never missed a single one of her birthdays in the past. That afternoon, while Ruyan and Lu Jingyan stayed behind to rehearse for the school festival, Chen Fan didn't wait for them and went straight home. Li Xia was already there. As soon as he arrived, she and the dog, Dabai, came out to greet him. Seeing her there, he couldn't help but smile. Perhaps because of the connections from his past life, he felt that every moment they spent together now was incredibly precious. Seeing his smile, Li Xia paused. Xia froze for a moment. She had grown accustomed to his willful and cold demeanor, and his recent warmth and enthusiasm left her feeling a bit shy. She didn't quite dare to give him orders yet. Chen Fan looked at her with a smile, noting how early she had arrived, and suggested they head straight to the study. As we see them head upstairs, Chen Fan explained that he had encountered several difficult points during class and hoped to ask for her guidance. The two of them settled into the study, with Li Xia sitting right beside him. She had brought 2 test papers, wanting to gauge his current academic level. Chen Fan completed the tests with focused intensity before handing them over. Xia took the papers in silence, reviewing his work quietly for a long moment. Feeling a bit ashamed, he apologized for his lack of progress, but she reassured him that the problem wasn't his intelligence, but rather his study methods. She suggested starting with the basics, and he readily agreed. While teaching, Xia kept her head down, never quite looking him in the eye as she spoke. She was incredibly serious about the lesson. To his surprise, her way of explaining things was remarkably easy to understand, clarifying concepts that had previously baffled him. After explaining for a while, she began to feel a bit thirsty. But the moment she looked up, she realized that Chen Fan had been watching her intently. Feeling a wave of self-consciousness, she swallowed hard and quickly diverted her gaze back to the problems on the page, trying to regain her composure. She asked if there was a problem, and he admitted he was impressed by her patience, though he wondered why she was so cold over text, using only 2-word replies. He asked if she held a grudge because of his history with Ruyan. She denied it, explaining that her family had visited yesterday, leaving her quite busy. She hadn't seen his messages until the morning, but she made it clear that if he ever needed help, he could call her at any time. Just as the two were getting back to work, Chen Fan's phone suddenly rang. He answered it quickly, only to hear a familiar, sharp voice on the other end. It was Ruyan, demanding to know what he meant by his recent actions. Chen Fan was genuinely confused by her accusatory tone, wondering what he had done now. She screamed that he was having her things thrown out. He didn't understand why she was so shocked, considering he had already made his intentions clear. He glanced at Li Xia, making no effort to hide the conversation, and told Ruyan directly that he had already informed her she was fired yesterday. Since she no longer worked for him, there was no reason for her things to remain in his house. He told her not to bother him during his lesson. He hung up without a second thought. Meanwhile, Ruyan stood before the door, watching her luggage being tossed out, unable to believe he would actually do this. It seemed he really was moving on. After ending the call, Chen Fan simply turned back to Li Xia and suggested they continue, and she softly agreed. Not a moment later, the study door was suddenly pushed open. Ruyan stood there, her face darkened with intense anger. As her gaze fell upon Chen Fan and Li Xia, a flicker of contempt crossed her eyes. Seeing her appear there, Chen Fan stood up and asked what she wanted. He wondered why she was suddenly pestering him when she claimed to dislike him so much. Ruyan stepped forward, her voice sharp with accusation, asking if he found it amusing to humiliate her like this. Li Xia, instinctively standing in front of him to offer protection, also rose to her feet. Chen Fan countered by asking how exactly he was humiliating her. He pointed out that he was the one who had truly been humiliated. After all, he had been paying for every single one of her expenses, only to watch her stay glued to Lu Jingyan every day. He had followed them like a servant, serving them both, only to endure her coldness in return. To him, that was the true humiliation, yet now that he was taking everything back, she felt wronged. Ruyan pursed her lips tightly, telling him not to think that bringing someone else here would ever force her to be with him. She declared it was impossible for her to ever like him before turning to leave, and even managed to bump into the door on her way out. Chen Fan opened the window and watched her head downstairs, grab her luggage, and leave without a single moment of hesitation. She certainly left decisively enough. Ruyan had always been a proud woman in front of him. Despite her family's poverty, she possessed an unyielding spirit. No matter how well he treated her, she refused to succumb to the temptation of money. He had once admired that about her. Though looking back now, it all seemed rather ridiculous. Li Xia, seeing him standing by the window, softly suggested they continue, or perhaps she should leave. She worried his mood was ruined, but he assured her he was fine. He was simply reflecting on his past life and the foolish things he'd done. He wasn't feeling sad about Ruyan at all, which, to be honest, was a significant change from his former self. In this life, he was determined not to fall ill or meet such a miserable end again. Xia insisted on leaving and headed for the door, but he took a step forward and caught her hand. She froze, turning back to look at him in confusion, wondering what was wrong. He wasn't entirely sure why he did it, but he wasn't blind. He could tell she was upset. Whenever Ruyan appeared and spoke like that, Xia would instinctively try to distance herself from him. Given how close he and Ruyan had once been, he had never hidden their history. It seemed that everyone, including Li Xia herself, was under the impression that Chen Fan was still deeply in love with Ruyan. And to be fair, he truly had loved her once. If not for the tragic end he met in his previous life, he might never have woken up. Seeing Xia watching him, he gently let go of her hand and asked if she was free this Saturday to grab dinner at the Huangting Hotel. He invited her along, noting the food there was exquisite. Having essentially starved to death in his past life, he only wanted to enjoy himself now. In the past, he would have brought Ruyan without a second thought, but now he much preferred Xia's company. After all, she was his father's choice. Unless he actively fought it, he would likely marry Xia after graduation. He used to think his father was disrespecting his autonomy by arranging this. But looking back, she was just as beautiful as Ruyan, with the added bonus of a prestigious family background and a kind heart. He realized that if she actually liked him, he was the one getting the better end of the deal. She asked if he wasn't going with Ruyan instead. He countered by asking if she really wanted him to be with Ruyan and avoid her like he used to. She quickly denied it, so the date was set. We moved to Saturday afternoon, where Chun Fan arrived a bit late. At the entrance, he spotted several old friends waiting there. They were all dressed to the nines. Upon seeing him, Wang Yan, a close friend of his rival Lu Jingyan, couldn't help but let out a mocking laugh. She sneered, asking how he could possibly show his face here. He simply asked why he shouldn't be allowed to attend. The owner of the Huangting Hotel was a close friend of his father, making Chun Fan a super VIP who could visit whenever he pleased. Wang Yan laughed coldly, pointing out that Ruyan hadn't spoken to him at school for days. Yet here he was, shamelessly crashing her birthday party. It turned out it was indeed Ruyan's birthday. He had been so focused on his classes lately that the date had completely slipped his mind. If they hadn't reminded him, he would have forgotten entirely. He had actually made arrangements with the hotel staff for this day long ago. It was Ruyan's 18th birthday, an occasion he had planned to celebrate with grand, unparalleled splendor back in his previous life. Yet, that was also the day he had learned the bitter truth. He recalled her snapping at him, telling him to stop interfering in her life. Back then, they had ended up in a cold war for 2 days, but he was the one who eventually broke and apologized just to keep her near. He had even committed the ultimate folly of handing over the company his father left him. Now he watched the lively scene before him. Chun Fan had no intention of paying them any mind. After all, he was the one who had arranged every detail of Ruyan's party at this hotel, and he was the one footing the bill. Now that he had come to his senses and stopped caring for her, he found it curious that she still dared to bring her friends here to spend his money. He wondered how she planned to settle the tab. Ignoring his classmates' mockery, he walked straight into the elevator. He had already booked a table for himself and Xia, and he wondered if she had arrived yet. The moment he stepped out of the elevator, he spotted Ruyan deep in conversation with Lu Jingyan. She, in turn, noticed his arrival immediately. Ruyan's gaze locked onto him instantly. She claimed she knew he would show up, even though he had acted as if he wouldn't. To be honest, her confidence was almost impressive. She walked toward him with a smug expression, teasing him about his change of heart. She warned him not to think that his presence alone would earn her forgiveness for his recent behavior. She insisted she was still angry with him. It was her usual tactic, really, using her anger as a weapon to force him into a submissive apology. He looked at her, a faint smile playing on his lips, and asked if she needed something. She was taken aback, asking if he hadn't come specifically for her birthday. He simply asked why he should celebrate her birthday when she hadn't even invited him. With so many classmates there, he noted, she surely wouldn't miss one person. Ruyan grew visibly irritated, convinced he was just being stubborn. In her mind, he was intentionally trying to ruin her day by being difficult. Just then, the restaurant manager approached him with a respectful bow. He greeted him as young Master Chun and asked if Li Xia had arrived yet. The manager nodded in confirmation, acknowledging the arrangements. Ruyan was stunned that he was actually looking for Xia. He glanced at her and pointed out that she was the one making a scene, not him. He reminded her that she used to find his presence annoying, so now that he was staying away, he couldn't understand her problem. He told her to go back to her friends. He glanced over at Lu Jingyan, who looked like he wanted to intervene, but felt it wasn't quite his place. Jingyan had never seen Ruyan take the initiative with Chun Fan like this. Of course, we know exactly why Ruyan was being so proactive. It wasn't that she couldn't let go of him. She just couldn't let go of the money in his pocket. In the past, she clearly disliked him, yet she comfortably enjoyed everything he provided. She would verbally reject his gifts while happily accepting every single one. Now that he was ignoring her, she was starting to panic. After all, she couldn't let this lavishly planned birthday banquet end in a humiliating disaster. She actually offered to distance herself from Lu Jingyan if that was what it took for him to stop acting out. For the first time ever, she was the one backing down. It was a rare concession that showed just how much she valued the prestige of this party. If she didn't care so much about appearances, things might have been different. We see that she wouldn't have maintained her wealthy persona at school, nor invited so many people to her birthday banquet, if she weren't actually afraid of losing face. Having seen Lu Ruyan's usual cold and noble demeanor, it was quite something to witness her compromising just to save a birthday party. Chun Fan found the situation rather amusing. He nodded, acknowledging that since she was celebrating her birthday, he shouldn't ruin everyone's fun. With that, he turned to the manager and mentioned the Emerald Hall he had previously reserved under Lu Ruyan's name. The manager checked the records and confirmed the booking. Chun Fan then suggested that since it was Ruyan's birthday, she should be allowed to use the hall. He looked at Ruyan and asked if that was satisfactory. Seeing him relent, Ruyan finally breathed a sigh of relief, though her pride remained intact. She claimed he was doing all this just to separate her from Lu Jingyan because he couldn't stand them being together. He told her she was overthinking it. He truly didn't care who she was with. He told her that in time, she would realize that without Chun Fan, she was nothing at all. The manager stood by quietly as Chun Fan's blunt words left Ruyan feeling utterly humiliated. She snapped that she was done with him and turned to leave. The manager glanced at him, offering to prepare the Emerald Hall. Chun Fan nodded but added a crucial detail. She had to pay the entire bill herself. He instructed that no one was to leave until the tab was settled. Once everything was arranged, he finally went to find Li Xia. Meanwhile, Ruyan returned to Lu Jingyan's side. Seeing her dark expression, Jingyan couldn't help but ask what had happened. Chun Fan knew she would never want anything to do with him again. When he walked into his own dining room, he found Xia focused on the menu. Hearing his footsteps, she looked up and their eyes met. He offered a warm smile and asked if she had been waiting long. She told him she had just arrived. As she watched him, he naturally took the seat right next to her, which caught her off guard. Li Xia felt a bit restless being so close to him, especially since there were plenty of other seats. He didn't notice her unease and asked if she had ordered. She said she was still looking, so he leaned in close, taking the menu from her hand to look at it together. Xia could hardly focus on the food anymore. She was too busy noticing him. He decided he wanted something with a strong flavor, a small way to remind himself that he was truly alive. The memories of his past life, the hunger, the cold, and the sleepless nights of pain, were a heavy burden. Even after being reborn, those nightmares occasionally returned. The food turned out to be quite spicy, and he fanned his mouth with his hand. Seeing this, she gently picked up a glass of watermelon juice for him. After taking a sip, Li Xia asked if he enjoyed spicy food. He admitted he liked it quite a bit, and she, surprisingly, agreed. She played along gracefully, picking up her chopsticks to taste the dishes while the waiter stood by, ready to serve them in the private suite. A moment later, the owner of the Huangting Hotel, a man known as Lord Zhou, stepped inside. Chun Fan greeted him politely as Uncle Zhou. Lord Zhou smiled, noting that Chun Fan was also present. In that moment, Chun Fan realized the man hadn't actually come to see him. Sure enough, Lord Zhou turned toward Xia, welcoming her to the hotel with a level of respect that bordered on the formal. He asked if everything was to her liking. Having been close to Chun Fan's father, Zhou was one of the few who knew Xia's true identity. Most people had no idea that the young heiress of the capital's prestigiously family was hiding here in Yun City. Xia gave a brief acknowledgement. She simply went back to her meal, her demeanor turning surprisingly cold. To be honest, she wasn't nearly as warm toward others as she was with him. Lord Zhou stood there for a while, even pouring her water personally, yet she remained silent. An icy, unapproachable aura seemed to fill the room. Eventually, Lord Zhou took the hint and politely excused himself, wishing them a pleasant meal, which, under the circumstances, was the only sensible move. Wait a moment, Uncle Zhou, Chun Fan called out, causing the man to stop in his tracks and turn back toward the table. Lord Zhou asked if there was anything else he needed, his smile warm and genuine. Chun Fan had always liked the man's kind nature. However, a dark memory surfaced. If he remembered correctly, in his past life, a devastating fire had broken out at this hotel just 3 days later. The cause had been inadequate fire safety in the kitchen. When the smoke cleared, it was discovered that the fire extinguishers were completely useless. That disaster had even resulted in casualties. It was a tragedy that would eventually bring the city's finest hotel to its knees. Lord Zhou himself had reportedly fallen ill from the stress of the aftermath. Looking at him now, Chun Fan asked if the hotel's fire safety was up to code. The sudden question caught Lord Zhou off guard. He looked at the young man, wondering why he was suddenly interested in such a mundane detail. Chun Fan suggested that it might be wise to have someone perform a thorough inspection, especially in the kitchen area. Lord Zhou remained confident. He assured them that their safety measures were perfect and that they took full responsibility for their guests. Chun Fan watched him quietly. Uncle Zhou, perhaps you should go and check it yourself. Seeing such persistence, a flicker of concern finally crossed Lord Zhou's face. Lord Zhou stared back, his expression souring. He asked what Chun Fan meant by that, wondering if the young man truly doubted his word, especially given his long friendship with Chun Fan's father. He insisted his character was beyond reproach and that he ran his business with a clear conscience. To be honest, he felt quite insulted that his integrity was being questioned. In Zhou's eyes, Chun Fan was still just a child who couldn't possibly understand these matters. But then, Xia spoke up, suggesting that since he mentioned it, perhaps it was worth a look. We should note that ever since Lord Zhou entered the room, Xia had barely acknowledged him. Whenever he asked a question, she had offered only the briefest of responses. However, because she was the one speaking now, Lord Zhou showed her immense respect and agreed to go. Xia remained perfectly composed throughout the exchange. Despite being roughly the same age as Chun Fan, her high status gave her words a weight that people found far more convincing. It was a subtle power, but an effective one. Once Lord Zhou had left, Chun Fan looked at Xia in surprise and asked why she had helped him. He had made the suggestion because he knew the future, but she had no such knowledge. From her perspective, there was no logical reason to support his claim, and yet, she had stepped in without a second thought. It was a curious gesture, to say the least. Xia simply replied that since he had spoken up, helping him was only natural. When he asked if she feared he might be lying, she dismissed the idea entirely. She noted that even if it were a joke, the only consequence was making the man walk a few extra steps. She spoke with a calm that made the whole matter seem trivial. As Chen Fan watched her, a wave of warmth washed over him. It was the rare, profound feeling of being deeply trusted by another person, something he hadn't felt in a long time. His mind drifted back to the moment he was diagnosed with HIV in his past life. Back then, no one believed he was a victim. They all assumed he had been reckless. He told himself that if he had actually been at fault, he could have accepted the blame. Instead, he faced a wall of accusations and disgust from everyone around him. Eventually, he had even begun to loathe himself. He never suspected that Lu Ruyan had intentionally used a contaminated needle on him just to avoid their marriage. It is a bitter truth that only the one who frames you knows exactly how innocent you are. Meanwhile, his dinner with Xia continued for quite some time. Even after they finished eating, they didn't leave. Chen Fan had brought his schoolwork along, so he decided to settle in and finish his assignments right there. The two of them stayed until evening, which was exactly when Lu Ruyan's birthday party was finally drawing to a close in another part of the city. As the guests prepared to leave, they found themselves detained because the bill hadn't been paid. In a panic, Ruyan tried to call Chen Fan. He ignored the first call, while Xia watched him quietly from across the table. He knew exactly who was calling and chose to let it ring, completely unbothered. Only after Ruyan called 2 more times did he finally pick up. On the other end, her voice shrieked, demanding to know what he thought he was doing. Her voice was thick with rage, but we see that the angrier she became, the more Chen Fan's mood seemed to improve. Though he wanted nothing to do with her, the debts of his past life still had to be repaid. He simply couldn't let that grudge go. With a slight smirk, he asked what was wrong, wondering why the school beauty was suddenly so furious. Lu Ruyan lowered her voice, demanding that he come over and pay the bill immediately, warning him not to cause trouble. To be honest, she had planned to cut ties with him forever after this party. She never imagined he was waiting for this exact moment to strike. Now, with no money to pay the bill, she found herself in a truly humiliating position. Everyone was being detained because of her, and all eyes were on her. Chen Fan noted how strange it was that he was being asked to pay for a birthday party he wasn't even invited to. He suggested that perhaps her classmates should all chip in and split the bill. After all, they were all such good friends, and she was always so generous with them. It was well known that they had a great relationship and that she frequently treated them to expensive meals. Everyone believed she was using the money she earned from tutoring, and they admired her for being so open-handed. They were more than happy to stay close to such a generous manager. The bitter irony, of course, was that she had been spending Chen Fan's money all along. Frustrated, she asked if he really had to do this and what it would take for him to just pay. He calmly replied that if one is asking for a favor, they should at least show a bit of humility. Through the phone, we can hear Lu Ruyan exhale in sharp, indignant frustration. She was clearly incensed that he was no longer her unconditional lapdog. Chen Fan just smiled, sensing her hesitation, and told her that if she wasn't willing to ask nicely, he would simply hang up. Desperate, and with her teeth clenched, she finally pleaded with him to help. She and her guests were being blocked by the hotel staff and literally could not leave. Chen Fan hung up and stood, telling Xia he needed to step out for a moment. He made his way down to the Emerald Hall, where the atmosphere had turned decidedly sour. The students who had attended the party were all still there, trapped in the room. Every single one of them was staring at Lu Ruyan, their expressions a mix of confusion and judgment. The silence was incredibly awkward. Unable to escape, Ruyan could only stand there helplessly, forced to endure the weight of everyone's gaze. The moment Chen Fan appeared, the manager approached him, politely addressing him as young Master Chen. He took a slow look around at the gathered crowd. They were all dressed to the nines, looking quite elegant, a sharp contrast to the disdainful looks they had given him earlier that afternoon. This time, however, their arrogance had vanished. After all, there is nothing quite as embarrassing as being stuck in a luxury hotel because you can't pay the bill. He asked the room why everyone looked so miserable at such a festive party. He took a moment to study Lu Ruyan, whose expression was darker than anyone else's. Nearby, Lu Jinyan stood to the side, looking completely lost as to how the situation had spiraled. The manager explained that Miss Lu had failed to settle the account, so he was simply following protocol by asking them to pay before they departed. Chen Fan waved it off as if it were nothing, telling the manager there was no need for such a scene. Since they were his classmates, he announced he would settle the bill himself. He handed over his card, and as the manager took it to process the payment, the expressions of everyone in the room shifted into something far more complex. They watched in silence. It was Lu Ruyan's birthday party, yet she had called him here to pay the bill. They couldn't help but wonder why she couldn't pay for it herself. Ruyan felt her face burning with shame. She stared at him, realizing why he had agreed to come so easily. His goal, she realized, was to humiliate her and ensure everyone knew the truth about her finances. He wanted the world to know she was broke and entirely dependent on his money. She told herself he could have handled this discreetly, but instead, he chose the most public path possible. By making such a show of swiping his card in front of everyone, she felt he had truly lost his mind. A moment later, the manager finished processing the transaction. He handed the card and the receipt back, addressing him as young Master Chun and confirming the payment was complete. Chun Fan glanced at the bill and intentionally read the total aloud. $86,000. He looked at Lu Ruyan and wished her a happy birthday, adding that while he would cover the bill this time, there would certainly not be a next time. After speaking, he glanced over at Lu Jinyan, who was standing right beside him. We see Jinyan's face begin to turn a pale, sickly shade of gray as the reality set in. The situation was baffling to the onlookers. If all of Lu Ruyan's money came from Chin Fan, then she wasn't the wealthy heiress she claimed to be. To be honest, the revelation was stunning. For the students present, this scene was a massive slap in the face to their expectations. Wang Yin stepped forward, demanding to know what kind of joke Chun Fan was playing. She claimed that the money belonged to Ruyan and was only in his possession because he was the son of their servant. She accused him of merely managing her funds and acting far too proud. Chun Fan looked at Wang Yin and gave a soft, amused smile. He asked her if her family usually let servants keep all their money. It was a fair question, really. He decided to set the record straight, informing her that he wasn't the servant's son. In fact, it was Lu Ruyan's father who served as his family's personal driver. He reminded them of the day at the school gate when she had ditched him for Lu Jinyan. Because of that, her father had already been fired. He invited them to ask her themselves if they doubted him. He turned his gaze toward her, calling her by a mocking nickname and asking for her input. She glared back at him, her eyes filled with a bitter, burning resentment. In all her life, no matter how little she actually had, she had never endured such public humiliation. Now, we see that everyone was looking at her as if she were a punchline. She found herself unable to argue, fearing that if she spoke up, he might simply refund the money and leave her trapped there again. Without a word, she turned and walked out. Lu Jinyan, having witnessed the entire collapse of her facade, quickly followed her out. The atmosphere in the room had become completely unbearable for them both. She had to leave, but she was reeling from the fact that her secret was out. The others were left wondering why, if she was just a driver's daughter, she had acted so superior. We see the room fall into a confused silence, as everyone wonders why she pretended to be a wealthy heiress. After the pair left, Chen Fan glanced at the remaining guests and told them there was nothing more to see. He suggested they all head home, reminding them to be careful on the road since it was getting quite late. One by one, the students began to filter out of the Emerald Hall. Only after watching the last of them depart did he finally step out of the hall himself. The manager personally escorted him toward the entrance, walking him all the way to the elevator doors. At that exact moment, Li Xia arrived, and the two of them entered the elevator together. This time, however, he remained uncharacteristically quiet, lost in his own thoughts. Although he had successfully cleared his name and revealed his true status to everyone, he didn't feel particularly happy. Deep down, he felt that this small victory was hollow. Compared to the years of suffering he had endured, this minor punishment for Lu Ruyan couldn't truly dissolve the resentment in his heart. Xia noticed his silence and chose not to disturb him. When they reached the ground floor, they were surprised to find Old Man Zhou waiting there. As soon as he spotted them, he immediately hurried toward Chin Fan. This time, his focus wasn't on Xia, but entirely on the young man. He took Chin Fan's hand with a look of profound relief, calling him Xiao Fan. He expressed his deep gratitude, admitting that if it hadn't been for the warning, the hotel would have faced a major disaster. He had just finished a personal inspection and found numerous issues. It turned out his cousin had been incredibly negligent, so he had already sent the man packing. Then, Old Joe curiously asked how he had known about the hotel's fire safety problems. The question caught him off guard for a moment. Having no logical explanation, he simply made up a quick excuse, claiming he had seen it in a dream the night before. Old Joe couldn't help but laugh at such an absurd answer, but he decided not to press the matter further. Instead, he mentioned he had prepared some gifts for the two of them. He signaled to his assistant, who brought over 2 small gift bags as a token of his appreciation. It was a gesture of genuine thanks for saving his business. He told them to reach out whenever they needed anything, clearly keeping this debt of gratitude in mind. Old Joe then saw them to the door, where the Lee family car was already waiting. As he sat in the car gazing out the window, we see that the streets were mostly empty of pedestrians, though the roads were still quite congested with traffic. Usually, he and Xia had plenty to talk about, but tonight the silence between them was heavy. Xia didn't try to force a conversation, sensing his mood. She couldn't stop thinking about how he had predicted the safety issues at the Huangting Hotel. Logically, there was no way he should have known more about the hotel than Old Joe did. She had also heard rumors about what happened in the Emerald Hall. It was Lu Ruyan's birthday, yet he hadn't spent a single moment by her side, choosing to stay with Xia instead. Not only that, but he had gone out of his way to humiliate Ruyan publicly. It seemed as though he truly wanted to sever ties with her completely and irrevocably. She wondered why he looked so dejected if that was what he wanted. In reality, however, his melancholy was only a fleeting shadow that lasted a moment. He didn't let the sadness linger for long, knowing deep down that he had been reborn and everything could be done over. As long as he didn't repeat the mistakes of his past life, there was still time to set things right. Before long, a wave of exhaustion washed over him. After all, attending school seriously every day lately was proving to be quite draining. He felt as if he could never get enough sleep, and in his drowsy state, he gradually drifted closer to his companion. He leaned against Li Xia and fell fast asleep, leaving her frozen in place, afraid to move. By the time they reached the Chun residence, her arm had grown quite sore. Yet, she didn't dare shift her position for fear of waking him, choosing to endure the discomfort. When the driver announced they had arrived, Xia glanced outside before her gaze fell back on his pale, quiet face, hesitating over whether to wake him. By then, the driver had already stepped out of the car to wait. Xia, however, remained still. Sensing the car had stopped, he finally woke up and glanced out the window. Realizing he was home, he turned his gaze toward Xia, only to find her sitting there silently, not even daring to look him in the eye. He gently rubbed his stiff neck and sat up straight, noting they had arrived. Xia simply nodded. When he asked why she hadn't woken him, she replied that he looked so peaceful, all while maintaining her usual, expressionless face. As he looked at her, he noticed the tips of her ears were turning red. He remembered that she had always been quite innocent when it came to matters of the heart. Even though she often acted as if she disliked being around him, Xia gave a small cough and admitted she just wasn't used to being so close to others. He was the first, she said. Hearing this, he couldn't help but chuckle and asked why she hadn't just pushed him away then. As if to prove he didn't have any influence over her, Xia quickly changed the subject, asking why he and Lu Rian had split when he used to like her so much. The question made him pause, staring out at the empty street. He simply said he realized he didn't love her anymore. With a brief goodbye, he stepped out of the car just as the gates of the Chun Manor slowly began to swing open. His father, Chen Qingming, walked toward the entrance. Seeing him, the young man's eyes lit up with genuine joy as he welcomed his father home. Qingming was usually far too busy with work, leaving his son alone at home. And while there were plenty of servants, few could actually control the boy. Even his father tended to spoil him, rarely disciplining him as long as he was happy. Being pampered by his father was his most carefree memory. Those carefree days were a memory from his past life. Back then, his father had begged him not to focus so much on Lu Rian, but he never listened. Now seeing his father return, everything felt different. Initially, Qingming's expression was stern, as he hoped to reclaim a bit of fatherly authority in front of his son, who knew, however, that the young man would suddenly break down in tears. Qingming panicked instantly, gently patting his son's shoulder and asking what was wrong, or if someone had bullied him. He even wondered if it was that girl, Lu Rian, especially since he'd heard his son had fired both her and her father. The boy just hugged him, saying it was nothing, he simply missed him. His father called him a silly boy, noting how he usually found extra phone calls annoying. Then, he noticed the Li family car. Li Xia had already stepped out, and the young man felt a bit embarrassed that she saw his red eyes. He explained that Xia had simply driven him home after they went out for dinner. Qingming glanced at him, looking quite surprised. After all, his son had previously been extremely resistant to the idea of an engagement, even claiming he would never have anything to do with Li Xia. And yet, here the two of them were actually spending time together. Though he didn't know what had sparked this change, Qingming turned to Xia and invited her in to sit for a while. Xia, politely greeting Uncle Chun, declined the invitation, saying she needed to head home. She stole a quick glance at the young man before turning back to the car. As the Li family vehicle drove away, he finally followed his father inside. Qingming, seeing those red, aggrieved eyes, asked again if Xia had bullied him. He simply shook his head and denied it. In his mind, he could only remember how old his father had looked when he passed away in the previous life. Qingming kept questioning him for a long time, only relaxing once he was sure Lu Rian hadn't done something. On Sunday morning, just after waking up, the butler informed him that Lu Rian had arrived. The events of the previous night flashed through his mind. They had essentially reached a breaking point. Rian should have understood by now that he wouldn't spoil her anymore. He hadn't expected her to actually show up. Going downstairs, he found she wasn't alone. Her father, Uncle Lu, was sitting on the sofa. Uncle Lu told Qingming that his daughter had been sensible and that he had already scolded her. He promised she would never bully Chen Fa again. Qingming's brow furrowed at the mention of the name. To be honest, he had disliked this pair for a long time, and if it weren't for the fear of his son cutting ties with him, he wouldn't have tolerated them at all. Realizing he had overstepped, Uncle Lu quickly apologized, calling him young master instead. He quickly shifted his gaze as the young man came downstairs, wishing him a nervous good morning. Uncle Lu explained that he had brought Lu Rian specifically to apologize. We see him turn toward Rian, who is sitting there with a dark, gloomy expression. She remained silent, and to be honest, Chen Fa didn't think she looked like someone here to apologize. Her face was practically screaming with reluctance. It was obvious she still held a grudge over last night, so an apology seemed unlikely. Chen Fa simply told Uncle Lu that Rian hadn't offended him. He insisted there was no need for apologies, but Uncle Lu brought up the fact that he had fired her. Interestingly, Uncle Lu hadn't been this anxious when he himself was fired. After all, his monthly salary wasn't much despite the long hours. Rian was different. She earned a fortune just by helping with tutoring. She might have even expected to own the entire Qin estate one day. But now that things had turned so sour, Uncle Lu couldn't possibly let her continue. He wouldn't agree to her tutoring Chen Fa anymore under these tense circumstances. So, Chen Fa explained he had simply fulfilled her wishes by letting her go. He claimed there was no conflict or unpleasantness between them. He insisted an apology was unnecessary. Qingming glanced at his son, noticing how incredibly calm he remained while saying all of this. In the past, Chen Fa had been the one desperately insisting on Rian's tutoring, and she had only agreed because she had no choice. Now, he had actually fired her. Qingming was surprised, but also deeply moved. It seemed his son had finally grown up. Chen Fa then announced it was time for breakfast in class. After that, Qingming had the father and daughter escorted out. Once he finished eating, Chen Fa headed out to the courtyard where the driver was waiting. As the car pulled out of the Chen estate, we see Rian still standing at the gate with her father. His demeanor had changed completely from the gentle act indoors. Uncle Lu raised his hand and delivered a sharp slap to her face. Chen Fa knew her family history all too well. Her father was a gambling addict. Her mother couldn't take it and had abandoned her years ago. Since then, she had lived with her father, relying on borrowed money from relatives for school. Despite those hardships, she had managed to excel, consistently ranking first in her school, a truly impressive feat in any normal situation. Because of this, Chen Fa had once cherished her deeply, looking out for her and giving her the very best of everything just so she could have a better life. Unfortunately, while he was busy pitying her, she never felt a shred of sympathy for him. She saw him only as an ATM, while her heart belonged to someone else. He looked away and headed straight to school. Due to the events of the previous day, the atmosphere around him seemed to have softened considerably. His classmates began to approach him for conversation, curiously asking if his family was truly as wealthy as the rumors suggested. The whispers began immediately, with classmates noting that all of Rian's money had come from him, despite everyone thinking she was a wealthy heiress. They admitted it felt strange, and one girl even suggested that Chun Fan look her way instead, promising to be far more obedient than Rian ever was. Chun Fan looked at the girl making the offer, listening to her words with a sense of detachment, and that was when the inevitable happened. Rian appeared, claiming that just because she had refused him, he was treating her this way. She insisted that even with these tactics, she would never like him. She lashed out, calling him a failure who relied only on his family's wealth to make everyone revolve around him. To her, he was nothing. She claimed he wasn't worth a single finger of Lu Jinyan's. Hearing this, the crowd suddenly remembered that Chun Fan's grades were, in fact, at the bottom of the class. In their eyes, he wasn't just Rian's devoted follower. He was a complete academic failure. Before he could speak, Rian brought up the birthday party. She claimed he had forced her to invite everyone when she didn't want to go, only to intentionally embarrass their classmates in the end. She asked if he thought his money gave him the right to toy with people's dignity, and then she tried to rewrite the history of their financial arrangement. She argued that the money was simply payment for her tutoring, declaring she would never take another cent from him or help him ever again. After delivering her speech, she immediately swapped seats with someone else, acting as if she wanted absolutely nothing to do with him anymore. She was back to playing the role of the cold, aloof scholar. She had always been like this, though Chen Fan hadn't forgotten her desperate look from the night before. While he had felt a flicker of pity seeing her father strike her earlier, he now felt that the slap had been well-deserved. He wasn't going to indulge her anymore. He looked at her and brought up the subject of the tutoring she was so proud of. He pointed out that his monthly ranking at the bottom of the class was the direct result of her tutoring. Rian simply stared back with an expressionless face. She cruelly remarked that he was simply too stupid and suggested that, since he was so rich, he should try to buy himself a new brain instead. When she said that, the others couldn't help but laugh. Chen Fan watched her self-righteous display and asked if she was sure the problem was his intelligence. He questioned if the issue was actually her teaching method. Rian, knowing that Li Xia was now tutoring him, gave a disdainful snort. She challenged him to show her his results during the next monthly exam. She didn't even ask for a miracle, really. She stated that if his rank improved by even 100 spots, she would admit she was the problem. She was curious to see what Xia could actually achieve. She doubted anyone could teach a brain that simply didn't work. We see her challenge him to rise just 100 spots, not even a major leap. It was clear just how much she looked down on him. Once Rian saw him agree, she turned to the crowd, announcing that they had all heard his promise. She declared that if his rank improved by 100 spots in the next exam, she would punish herself by running 10 kilometers. The crowd buzzed with excitement, their eyes fixed on Rian. Wang Yin then looked at Chen Fan, suggesting that if the school beauty was running, he should too. She asked if he could even handle 10 kilometers, taunting him to just admit defeat now if he was too much of a coward to try. Chen Fan didn't think 100 spots was that difficult, especially since Li Xia's teaching methods were so much easier for him to grasp. He could feel his own progress, so he agreed immediately, thinking it was a good way to push himself. After all, one needs a goal to stay motivated. Seeing him act so tough, Rian couldn't help but let out a mocking laugh, calling him an idiot before sitting back down. To be honest, she was surprised. She hadn't expected him to actually accept. When she used to tutor him, he was always clueless, and she felt she knew his true level better than anyone. She was already looking forward to watching him struggle through those 10 kilometers. Meanwhile, Lu Jinyan was standing right at the door. He had heard everything Rian said. Though he had been feeling down all night, he seemed to have reached a realization in this moment. In his eyes, Rian was brilliant and beautiful. Even if her family was poor, her hard work made her 100 times better than a useless heir like Chen Fan. He believed she would succeed on her own merit. With that thought, he walked over and told Rian that even if her father was just a driver, he worked honestly. He praised her for maintaining the best grades despite her circumstances, noting how difficult it must have been for her to get this far. He promised to always stand by her and support her. It was a touching sentiment, or so it seemed to the onlookers. By bringing this up, Jin Yin made the skeptical classmates feel a sudden wave of sympathy for Rian. Their perception shifted instantly. They remembered she had always been a top student. They didn't like her for money, but for her supposed character and academic excellence. In contrast, they saw Chun Fan as someone who didn't even try, yet felt entitled to be with her. It seemed quite shameless to them. Thanks to Rian's words, everyone now viewed him as a talentless fool. He had finally shed the labels of simp and useless son, only to gain a new one. Now, people avoided him because of his grades, but he didn't really care. Compared to the crushing loneliness of his past life, this was nothing. To him, their behavior was a trivial matter. After all, he still had his wealth and loving parents, so he simply focused on class and ignored them. After school, his father arrived in the car with his mother to pick him up. Though they were in their 40s, in their youth, they had been quite the stunning couple. Even now, their elegance hadn't faded a bit. As soon as his mother stepped out of the car and saw her son, she immediately gave him a warm, heartfelt embrace. It was a simple gesture of maternal love, yet it didn't go unnoticed by the surrounding students. Seeing him with an older woman, the onlookers couldn't help but feel a flicker of curiosity. They whispered that she looked to be about 40 and wondered what her connection to Chun Fan was. The rumors began to swirl immediately. Some mockingly suggested that there was no way Chun Fan was a real young master, doubting he was anything special at all. Rian didn't bother to explain the truth to anyone. Lu Jinyan looked at her, and seeing her silence, he assumed the crowd's petty guesses must be correct. Suddenly, she felt a strange sense of relief. Even if Chun Fan's grades were poor, his family was wealthy enough to spend hundreds of thousands in a single night without blinking. Deep down, Jinyan felt a pang of envy, always feeling as though he were naturally a step below Chun Fan in status. He told himself that one day, he would have everything Chun Fan possessed. As he and Rian boarded the bus, she told him she couldn't see him off today. Since she could no longer earn money by tutoring Chun Fan, she had found a part-time job. Her father had accumulated massive gambling debts, and in the past, he had taken most of her earnings. Now, she had to find a way to support herself. Jin Yin agreed. While Chun Fan's parents took him out, they bought him a brand new phone and then took him to dinner. By the time they arrived at the restaurant, Li Xia was already there waiting for them. In Yun City, Xia lived with her uncle, who happened to be very close friends with Qin Qingming. This was meant to be a formal meeting between the two families. Qingming had wanted to arrange this dinner for a long time, but Chun Fan had always resisted, his eyes fixed only on Rian. Thus, the meeting never happened until now. Seeing his son willing to join them today filled Qingming with a deep sense of relief. He felt his son had finally grown up and was willing to listen to him. During the meal, he and Xia's uncle chatted happily. Chun Fan sat next to Xia and eventually mentioned the bet he had made to improve his rank by 100 spots. After he finished explaining the situation, Xia didn't say much at first, simply giving a quiet nod of acknowledgement. He couldn't quite read her expression. He asked if she thought he was being reckless or if the pressure would be too much for him. After hearing those words, Xia looked at him. He asked if she thought he had a chance, noting that he finally understood the problem she explained. She looked back at him calmly and told him to simply leave it in her hands. To be honest, she found him quite bright, not at all as foolish as others claimed. The others she referred to was, naturally, Rian. While Xia hadn't said anything when Rian insulted his intelligence before, she had certainly remembered it. Hearing this, he couldn't help but smile, feeling a sense of relief. He told her that with her help, he was ready to work hard during this time. She replied that it was only natural. As they spoke, we see the private room suddenly grow quiet, and he realized his father and Xia's uncle were watching them. The attention made him feel a bit awkward, and he asked his father why he was staring. Qingming just smiled and told them to carry on with their conversation. Qingming continued chatting with Xia's uncle, but deep down, he couldn't help but feel moved by how well the two of them were getting along. Even though he had arranged this engagement himself, he jokingly felt as if his son was already being stolen away. After dinner, the group prepared to part ways. Since Qingming and the uncle had more business to discuss, Chun Fan and Xia left first. Instead of going home, they headed to a nearby cafe. He wanted some ice cream, so he went to order. When he returned and sat down beside Xia, they immediately went back to discussing their schoolwork. His mind was completely occupied with his studies. After all, failing to improve his rank would be a devastating blow to his pride. A little later, a server arrived with their order. He looked up, only to realize that the person standing there in the uniform was someone very familiar. It was Rian. He stared at her in genuine surprise, asking what she was doing there. Rian, however, just gave him a cold, piercing look. She told him that she should be the one asking that question. She was certain he had followed her here on purpose just to annoy her during her shift. Despite his recent coldness, Rian told herself that he was still in love with her and was simply acting out. Otherwise, how could he have found her here? She didn't believe in such coincidences, but he simply told her she was overthinking it. It was, in fact, a complete accident. Rian glanced at Xia and, without another word, turned and walked away. She clearly felt that talking to them was a complete waste of her time. Seeing her arrogant attitude, he truly couldn't understand what she was so proud of. He turned back and offered the ice cream to Xia, but she declined. She told him to eat it himself, then reached out to help him with his bag as they walked out of the cafe together, which, naturally, was for the best. He had planned to stay longer, but running into Rian had completely ruined the mood. For the next 2 weeks, he spent every waking moment studying desperately. Shia began visiting the Chun household regularly to tutor him, and we see his grades improve significantly, though Rian was always there to watch. Whenever she saw him working so hard, she couldn't resist mocking him, telling Chen Fan it wasn't too late to give up if he felt regret. She warned him not to come crying when the results were out, but he simply frowned, telling her she was being too noisy as he put on his headphones. Finally, the monthly exams came to an end. Feeling exceptionally cheerful, he hurried home immediately, eager to leave the stress behind. Although the results weren't public yet, he felt he had performed quite well. He found Shia sitting in the courtyard, drinking tea and keeping Dubai company. Noticing that Dubai was getting quite fat, he walked over to hug the dog and asked Shia why she had arrived so early today. She replied that she was early every day, which made him curious if she had any other activities or responsibilities at her own school. He remembered that Rian and Lu Jingyan, being top students, always had so much to do, yet Shia seemed to have far more free time. Every time he returned, she was already there. She explained that she was quite free and didn't usually participate in school events. Shia shook her head, explaining she didn't join the student council. She occasionally entered competitions, but generally avoided them. When he asked why, she admitted it felt meaningless, and her teachers felt her participation was a bit like an unfair pro-level intervention. He mentioned he'd seen her in many competitions before, specifically the ones Rian entered, where Shia always seemed to take the top spot. Apparently, Shia had consistently beaten her, which was why Rian disliked her so much. Shia simply took a quiet sip of her water. It seemed she never missed a chance to compete if Rian was involved. Eager to know his standing, he began checking his answers with Shia. He was in high spirits after realizing he got many difficult questions right. On the day the results were released, the teacher entered the classroom. As usual, the teacher praised Rian and Lu Jingming for taking first and second place again. But after the usual praise, the tone shifted. The teacher announced there was one more person to mention, Chen Fan. Hearing this, he perked up while Rian shot him a mocking look. To her surprise, the teacher continued, stating that Chen Fan's performance this time was actually quite impressive. Despite previously being at the bottom, he had made a massive leap, managing to break into the top 200 of the entire grade. The teacher noted that with continued effort, he would surely excel in the final exams. At the mention of top 200, everyone stared in disbelief. Even Rian was momentarily stunned. She had expected him to improve by maybe 100 spots at most, but breaking into the top 200 was another matter entirely. To be honest, Chun Fan hadn't expected such a massive leap himself. Perhaps it was because his past life had been so full of hardship and struggle. He no longer cared for idle pleasures, choosing instead to focus intensely during every lesson. Every day, he listened with absolute concentration, and then he would return home to review everything with Shia. She was a gifted teacher, making even the most complex problems seem simple the moment she explained them. It seems that hard work truly does pay off. However, a skeptical voice broke the silence, asking the teacher if there hadn't been some mistake given Chen Fan's poor history. The teacher looked at him with a calm expression, assuring the class there was no error. Previously, having a student who dragged down the class average had been a burden, but seeing such progress changed everything. Feeling validated by the teacher's praise, Chun Fan felt a genuine sense of accomplishment. He turned his gaze toward Rian, who was watching him silently. He reminded her of their bet. She had called him stupid, and now she owed him a 10-kilometer run. Rian bit her lip, unable to comprehend how someone she considered so dim-witted could improve this much. She wondered if Shia was truly that capable of a tutor. After school, Rian was forced to begin her 10-kilometer run. Rather than heading home, Chun Fan decided to stay behind just to enjoy the spectacle. He sat quietly nearby, watching her struggle after her pride had taken such a fall. Deep down, he felt a sudden and inexplicable sense of satisfaction. It was, quite frankly, a refreshing change of pace. Meanwhile, Lu Jingyan watched him from a distance, irritated by how cold and indifferent Chun Fan had become. A girl named Wang Yan leaned toward Lu Jingyan and whispered that the top 200 wasn't even that impressive, acting as if he had taken first place. She scoffed at the display, clearly unimpressed by his sudden academic rise. She muttered that even with better grades, his character remained the same, though Lu Jingyan told her not to gossip, being far too kind for his own good. Wang Yin patted Lu Jingyan's shoulder appreciatively. By the time Rian finally finished her 10 kilometers, the sun was already beginning to set. Drenched in sweat, she walked back and asked if he was finally satisfied. He nodded, thanked her for the hard work, and invited her to bet against him again anytime. With that, he stood up and left the campus full of joy. Rian stood there, watching his retreating figure as he walked away without a second glance. He was in such high spirits that he even added a little skip to his step. In her memory, he had always been a desperate follower, constantly seeking her approval. But now, he couldn't even be bothered to look at her. She found herself wondering if he truly intended to spend his future by Shia's side instead of hers. We see that both she and Shia come from well-off families, making them a perfect match in status. When the thought of them being together crossed her mind, Rian found herself feeling deeply unsettled, as if something that belonged to her was being stolen. Just then, Lu Jingyan noticed her staring in Chun Fan's direction. He asked if she was tired and offered her some water, casually handing over a bottle of mineral water to help her recover. Rian reached out and took the water, offering a polite thank you. In front of Lu Jingyan, she always made sure to maintain her most graceful and well-mannered self. Lu Jingyan remarked on her hard work, but noted how strange it was that Chun Fan, whose grades were always poor, had suddenly made such a massive leap. Wang Yin chimed in, suggesting he must have cheated just to make the school beauty lose the bet. After all, Rian had tutored him daily before with no results. She wondered how he could improve so much all at once when his performance used to be so abysmal. Lu Jingyan glanced at Wang Yin, telling her she talked too much. He warned her that without evidence, she shouldn't spread rumors, or she might find herself in trouble she couldn't handle. Wang Yin, however, wasn't deterred. She declared she would speak to the teacher tomorrow. Meanwhile, Chun Fan headed home, eager to share the good news with Xia since she deserved the credit. After all, Xia's help was the reason Rian had to admit defeat. However, the butler, Zhou Shun, informed him that Xia hadn't come today, leaving him feeling quite dejected. He turned back to change his clothes before heading to the dining room. With his father away on business lately, he found himself all alone in the house. He decided to dial Xia's number. At that moment, Xia was swimming at home when a maid softly reminded her that she had an incoming call. The figure in the pool seemed not to hear at first, until the maid added that it was Chun Fan calling. Hearing this, Xia immediately surfaced from the water. She stepped gracefully onto the pool deck. The maid quickly approached, wrapping a towel gently around her as Xia prepared to answer. As she picked up the phone, the stern expression on her face vanished instantly, replaced by a soft smile. He asked if she was busy or if he was interrupting. She explained she had just been swimming. He mentioned he called because he heard she wasn't coming over and he had something to tell her. With a smile, he shared that his grades had improved significantly, even breaking into the top 200. He told her how Rian had to run 10 kilometers today. He admitted it felt incredibly satisfying to see her proven wrong. Xia walked over to a nearby lounge chair, patiently listening to him share his joy. After a while, he curiously asked if she was still there. She congratulated him, assuring him that his call wasn't a disturbance at all. She told him it was fine since she was free. He noted that teaching him every day must be exhausting, and suggested that perhaps she should take a couple of days to rest. He suggested he could study on his own for a while, asking her to reach out on QQ if she needed anything. Xia listened, not yet ready to hang up. She noted that he sounded a bit unhappy and asked if something had happened or if he needed help. That simple question caught him completely off guard. Xia thought to herself that her behavior hadn't seemed any different than usual, yet surprisingly, he had sensed her mood just through the phone. Seeing her silence, Chun Fan remarked that he knew she tended to keep her feelings hidden. Deep down, he felt a growing sense of connection. He told Xia that they were essentially comrades in arms now. Since she had helped him so much, he felt it was only right that he return the favor. Without her tutoring, he knew he never could have achieved such great results. He couldn't simply enjoy her efforts for free, especially since she didn't need money. Hearing him describe their relationship as comrades in arms made Xia smile helplessly. And so, we moved to the following day at school. When Chun Fan arrived, the class teacher walked in with a heavy expression. She stood at the podium looking quite furious, radiating a palpable sense of pressure. Her gaze locked onto him immediately. She ordered Chun Fan to stand up, and he complied, staring back at her in complete confusion. The teacher announced that someone had reported him for cheating on the monthly exam. She asked if he had any explanation for himself. At the mention of cheating, Chun Fan glanced around and realized every eye in the room was on him. It was a rather uncomfortable spotlight, to say the least. He noticed Wang Yin sitting next to Lu Jingyan, wearing a triumphant smirk. With a serious face, Chun Fan asked the teacher what evidence there was. The teacher frowned, noting that his previous exam scores were heartbreakingly poor, while this recent leap was far too sudden to be ignored. She explained that such a massive improvement was difficult to understand. To be safe, the school decided he would have to take a different test again. Naturally, Chun Fan wasn't pleased about the retest. Wang Yin, however, couldn't wait a second longer and jumped up to intervene. She taunted him, claiming his hesitation proved he cheated. She argued that if the score was truly his own, he shouldn't be afraid of another test. Seeing her look at him as if she'd finally caught him red-handed, Chun Fan found the situation quite ridiculous. She had no proof whatsoever. He pointed out that the burden of proof lay with the accuser. Without evidence, he argued, her claims were nothing more than slander. He remarked that if everyone reported him daily, he'd spend all his time retesting instead of attending class. He might as well stop coming entirely. As he spoke up, Rian watched him with genuine surprise. His personality had always been quite soft before, usually shrinking back when others were aggressive. She found it hard to believe he was arguing so effectively. His thoughts were clear and sharp. Rian wondered if this was truly the same person she had known for so long. She knew him inside and out, yet now he seemed to have changed completely. Seeing him fight back with such sound logic was a revelation. To be honest, it was quite a transformation. The teacher argued that it wasn't wrong for others to question him, and that retaking the test was simply a way to prove his innocence. She claimed he wouldn't want people whispering behind his back. Seeing that the teacher remained insistent and clearly didn't believe he had earned his grades through hard work, Chun Fan could only offer a thin, knowing smile. He told her that while he could certainly take the test again, he found it utterly absurd to be questioned without a shred of evidence. It was a matter of principle, really. He pointed out that they were classmates, yet Wang Yan's motives for accusing him were suspicious. He wondered aloud what would happen if he scored even better on the next test. He mused that she would likely just find something else to say. Therefore, since she chose to report him without proof, he felt she should have to pay a price for her actions. He proposed a simple wager. If he proved he didn't cheat, she should be expelled. The moment the word expulsion left his lips, the teacher visibly hesitated. Wang Yan's grades were generally better than Chun Fan's, so the teacher naturally felt a bit protective of her. However, the rumors she was spreading were already damaging his reputation. He argued that if he couldn't handle the pressure of these false accusations and chose to do something drastic to himself, his situation would be far more tragic than hers. The mention of such a dark outcome made everyone in the room turn tense. Chun Fan then looked directly at Wang Yan, asking if she was too afraid to bet on her own certainty. Feeling provoked, Wang Yan didn't hesitate to accept the challenge. She was convinced she had the upper hand, which, as we will see, was a rather bold assumption. She indignantly told the teacher she was willing to bet her future on it. She reminded everyone that they all knew what Chun Fan's usual grades looked like. She asserted with absolute confidence that he had cheated, claiming his refusal to immediately retake the test was just a way to stall for time. Wang Yan was certain he was just acting out of guilt. She told the teacher that if Chun Fan was proven to be a cheater, he should be the one expelled instead. She claimed she didn't want to attend the same school as someone like him. Before the teacher could even intervene, Chun Fan had already agreed to the terms. The teacher simply told Chun Fan to come to her office after class and then walked out. Wang Yan watched him with a smirk, as if waiting for a show to begin. Rian, seeing him gamble his entire education on a single test, couldn't help but try to talk some sense into him. She asked if he was truly certain about this bet. She warned him that if he were caught, the expulsion would be incredibly humiliating. She suggested he should just apologize to the teacher instead, as the monthly exam wasn't everything. She even offered to plead with the teacher on his behalf if he showed sincere regret. In her eyes, his desire to outperform her had finally clouded his judgment. As we watch Chun Fan look at Rian, who is acting as if she only has his best interests at heart, he finds it difficult to ignore the irony. She hasn't spoken to him in ages. She usually maintains a cold, distant persona, yet here she is, offering unsolicited advice. He curls his lip into a smirk, noting that she clearly believes his grades were faked. He tells her that instead of offering this hypocritical advice, she should probably go and warn her dear friend Wang Yan instead. After all, they are quite close. While Wang Yan is the one speaking up, Chun Fan knows Lu Jinyan isn't innocent either. He is simply using others as his tools. It's a classic move for someone like him. In his past life, Chun Fan saw exactly what kind of person Lu Jinyan was. He remembers the patterns all too clearly, and he isn't about to be fooled again. Whenever things went poorly between him and Rian, Jinyan was always there with a sarcastic remark, acting like a master of manipulation. It was quite a performance, really. Rian's face darkens when she sees he isn't grateful for her help. She coldly asks if he is truly unable to tell that she is just trying to look out for him. He looks her over with genuine curiosity, wondering aloud if her job as a waitress is going poorly. He asks if she's regretting her choices and wants to rely on him again. The mention of relying on him makes Rian's expression turn grim. She remains silent, likely because her recent attempts at working for a living haven't been going well. Between her busy studies and her duties at the student union, she has to work late every night just to make ends meet. To be honest, it's a grueling schedule. The small amount of money she earns isn't nearly enough for her lifestyle. Chun Fan had spoiled her for so long that she is only now realizing how hard life can be. She had assumed he was just a spoiled young master throwing a tantrum for a few days. But now, she is confused as to why he isn't chasing after her anymore. In the past, no matter how poorly she treated him, he would always come back. Seeing her silence now, Chun Fan simply smiles, knowing exactly what she's thinking. He asks if she's still waiting for him to lose his nerve and come crawling back to apologize. In a way, he actually understands why she might expect that. He remembers the days after he was kicked out of his home, penniless and desperate. Those memories of struggling to survive are etched deeply into his mind. If one has always lived a frugal life, poverty is manageable. But going from luxury to nothing is a special kind of misery that is hard to describe. Back then, he spent his days lying in bed, lost in a world of pure fantasy. It was his only escape from the harsh reality of his situation. He used to imagine the moment Rian would realize he was innocent, forgive him, and take him back. But that moment, as we know, never actually arrived. He waited until the day he died, but she never believed in him. Instead, he only saw her marry someone else and learn the truth of how she framed him. He knows Rian's life isn't easy right now, and considering how long he provided for her, he feels he no longer owes her anything at all. Rian bites her lip as Chun Fan delivers a harsh truth. If she thinks he's ever coming back to coax her, she is living in a dream. He suggests that if she wants him back, she should try begging. Perhaps then, out of pity, he might be kind enough to give her some money. He speaks with a smile, though his heart remains cold. He doesn't actually intend to forgive her, but he finds the idea of her pleading quite appealing. We see that he wants to witness Rian, who has always been far too proud, finally break. After all, she caused his miserable death in their past life. He has no intention of letting her off easily this time, so he decides to dangle a small shred of hope before her. Rian, however, tells him to keep dreaming. She refuses to even consider the possibility of humbling herself before him. Later, we find that the dean and 2 other teachers have joined the class advisor. They present Chun Fan with a new set of exam questions to solve. After he finishes, the teachers grade the papers together. The results are undeniable. His scores are excellent, proving his previous grades were no fluke. The class advisor looks at him with surprise, admitting that he clearly didn't cheat, but wonders why his grades were so abysmal in the past. Chun Fan recalls how he used to lose his head over Rian. He simply explains that he was immature back then and didn't take his studies seriously. He claims a new tutor at home has made a difference. Perhaps only those who have left school truly understand how precious their time there really was. In school, effort usually leads to a visible reward. It's a simple, honest system, which, as we know, is rarely the case in the real world. Once you leave these halls, you learn just how cruel society can be. He returns to the classroom as the advisor and the dean arrive to announce the results. Once it's confirmed he didn't cheat, Wang Yan's face fills with panic. She can't believe it. To her, it seems impossible that he succeeded fairly. The advisor's expression is cold as he notes that the atmosphere in the class has turned sour. Students should be helping one another, not tearing each other down. He warns that making baseless accusations against improving students is a terrible blow to their morale, and he hopes everyone learns from this mistake. Chun Fan turns his gaze toward Wang Yan, reminding her that she promised to drop out. He notes, with a hint of irony, that she seems to be hesitating. He mocks the fact that some people can't even keep their own word, suggesting she shouldn't make bets she can't lose. Suddenly, Lu Jinyan steps in. Acting as the voice of reason, Jinyan claims there's no need for such hostility. He argues that Wang Yan only acted out of concern for Chun Fan's path. He asks Chun Fan to give her another chance. As soon as Jinyan speaks, the other students chime in, agreeing that dropping out is far too harsh. Chun Fan watches with a faint smile as the crowd begins to claim he's being too harsh, their faces showing how easy it is to judge when they aren't the ones being targeted. It's clear they are simply following Lu Jinyan's lead, hanging on his every word. Chun Fan looks at Jinyan and suggests that if he's so worried about her, perhaps he should drop out in her place. Jinyan purses his lips, and his eyes quickly well up with tears, looking for all the world like a victim of Chun Fan's bullying. It's a performance that works perfectly. The others immediately begin to scold Chun Fan, arguing that Wang Yan was the one who offended him, not Jinyan. They ask why he's attacking Jinyan for no reason. They remind him that Jinyan usually speaks up for him and treats everyone equally. Seeing the entire class turn against him, Chun Fan can only smirk at the absurdity of it all. He questions the idea of Jinyan being impartial, wondering aloud if Jinyan would have spoken up for him if he were the one being forced to drop out today. Jinyan insists that he certainly would have, claiming he has always told the other students to be kinder to Chun Fan in the past. Chun Fan offers a compromise. If she doesn't want to drop out, she can run 20 kilometers instead. Wang Yan stares at him, convinced that he is truly malicious. To her, 20 kilometers feels like a death sentence given her lack of athletic ability. Chun Fan coldly tells her that if she can't do it, she should just leave the school. In truth, whether Wang Yan stays or goes doesn't matter much to him, but he knows that without a punishment, everyone will think they can walk all over him. He needs to make sure she pays a price. Wang Yan finally agrees to the run, but Chun Fan adds another condition. She must apologize loudly while she does it. He demanded she admit she had framed him and tell everyone he hadn't cheated. It was a bold move, perhaps even a bit much, as it would leave her with absolutely nowhere to hide. He simply notes that compared to them, he considers himself quite merciful. Once class ends, Wang Yan heads to the track to begin her long journey. 20 kilometers is the price for staying in school, and she has no choice but to run. Chun Fan doesn't leave either. He sits on the nearby steps to watch her every lap. He has no intention of letting her off easy. Her stamina is nowhere near Lu Ruyan's level, and the added effort of shouting her apology makes her pace crawl. She is soon on the verge of collapsing from exhaustion. Lu Jinyan approaches Chun Fan, calling him Xiao Fan, and pleading for him to let her go since she's learned her lesson. He argues that unlike Rian, Wang Yan isn't physically strong and might actually die from the run. Chun Fan asks if that means it would have been his own fault if their rumors had driven him to death. Jinyan dismisses this, pointing out that Chun Fan is fine now and isn't the type to do something drastic. Chun Fan turns his gaze toward Jinyan's face. The afternoon sun hits Jinyan from behind, leaving his features lost in shadow and giving him a strange, condescending appearance. Chun Fan suddenly remembers how, before his miserable death in his past life, Lu Jinyan had called him specifically to mock him regarding Lu Rian. Chun Fan wonders if Lu Jinyan was directly involved in Wang Yan's schemes, but he knows for certain that Jinyan was aware of everything. In his past life, they had worked together to destroy him. And yet, here Jinyan is, calling him excessive. It's truly shameless. He wonders how long Jinyan plans to maintain this harmless persona, or if he actually expects Chun Fan to be like the others. blindly following his lead and pampering him. Chen Fan tells him that if he's so dissatisfied, he should go run in Wang Yan's place instead of standing there making sarcastic remarks. Seeing Lu Jinyan under fire, Lu Rian steps forward and tells Chen Fan not to go too far. She claims that Jinyan is only looking out for him, warning him that he won't be able to handle the consequences if something happens to Wang Yan. Chen Fan looks up at her and asks if this is a case of a beauty saving a hero. He reminds her that Jinyan was the one who provoked him, and if she doesn't want to be insulted, she should stay away. He then points out that all the gifts she gave Jinyan were bought with his money. He asks her if she really thinks Jinyan likes her for her personality, considering she's poor and has a father who is a gambling addict. Lu Jinyan only knew that Ruyan's father was a driver. He had no idea about the addiction. He glances at Lu Ruyan, and seeing her face turn pale, he decides not to dwell on her family matters for the moment. Instead, he turns back to Chen Fan and asks if this hatred and the targeting of his friends is all because of Lu Ruyan. To be honest, his ego seems to be doing the talking here. Jinyan suggests that if Chen Fan feels he stole her, he can simply have her back. Ruyan immediately protests, begging Jinyan not to say such things and claiming she doesn't like Chen Fan at all. Chen Fan tells her to save it. He has no interest in recycling trash. Before she can even respond, he continues his thought. As for the claim that he is bullying Wang Yan, he points out that the entire school knows she was the one who started this. It's a classic case of the tables turning. She thought she could bully others without consequence. But now that she's the one suffering, the narrative has suddenly shifted. In this new life, Chen Fan only cares about living well on his own terms, regardless of how others perceive him, which, naturally, is a very refreshing way to live. Seeing that Chen Fan is beyond saving, Lu Ruyan tells Jinyan that they shouldn't worry about him anymore. She warns that when something happens to Wang Yan, Chen Fan will be the one to regret it. With that, she pulls Jinyan away and they leave him behind. Wang Yan's stamina eventually fails her. After only 10 kilometers, she collapses and is rushed to the hospital by Lu Ruyan and Lu Jinyan. Chen Fan follows them to the hospital, where Lu Ruyan glares at him with spiteful joy, asking if he's happy now. He simply admits that yes, he is quite happy. He then picks up his phone and calls the hospital director to arrange for the best doctors, personally taking responsibility for all the medical expenses. Regarding the medical bills, Lu Ruyan and Lu Jinyan had originally planned to use Wang Yan's fainting spell as leverage against him, but now they were left speechless. We see Jinyan keeping watch in the hospital room as Wang Yan finally wakes up. He gently pats her shoulder, asking if she is all right. When he asks how she feels, Wang Yan immediately begins to play the victim, claiming that she feels terrible all over. Meanwhile, Chen Fan is casually sipping yogurt. He tells her quite plainly that the specialists have already examined her and she is perfectly healthy. She simply has poor stamina and needs more exercise. He then suggests that when she returns to school tomorrow, she should remember to make up the remaining 10 kilometers. Wang Yan stares at him in utter disbelief. She wonders how someone could be so vicious as to demand more running after she just collapsed. She asks him if he is trying to drive her to her death. He reassures her that she won't die, noting that if she faints again, the entire hospital staff is at her service. Seeing her face turn red with rage, he raises an eyebrow. He asks if she plans to back out, suggesting that if she can't finish, she could always choose to drop out instead. He then mentions that her parents work at Jingtian Group. Wang Yan's eyes widen as she realizes he knows about her family. She demands to know if he investigated her, but he simply asks, what if he did? Clenching her fists, Wang Yan finally yields and promises to finish the run tomorrow. Chen Fan admits that this makes him feel much more at ease. He warns her that as long as those 10 kilometers aren't finished, even if she were to die, he'd have the doctors bring her back. With that, he leaves. Lu Rian frowns as she watches him walk out with such a cold expression. Since Wang Yan is fine, she stays for her 4 drip and some rest. Afterward, Jinyan and Rian take her home. Chen Fan, however, hasn't been idle. Once home, he takes photos of the medical receipts and the diagnosis. He posts them directly into the class group chat. Having seen too many people try to frame others for accidents, he isn't about to leave any loose ends. Only after handling everything does he finally lie down to rest. The next day, Wang Yan obediently goes to the track to finish her 10 kilometers. After this ordeal, she no longer dares to be as arrogant in front of him as before. Even if she is full of resentment, she only dares to whisper it behind his back. She certainly doesn't dare to boss him around anymore, and the others have grown wary of him too. Everyone has seen the price of crossing him. It helps that he is wealthy enough to pay your medical bills after he's done with you. No one calls him a simp or mocks his grades anymore. On Monday afternoon, as he leaves the school, we see 2 very beautiful women standing at the entrance. To be honest, they look like they belong in a magazine. Judging by their uniforms, they are from the first high school. One of them is Lan Yingying, a well-known member of their tennis club. In the past, Chen Fan only had eyes for Lu Ruyan and never noticed anyone else. He had heard of Lan Yingying, but he couldn't recall what she looked like. Taking a look at her now, he notices she has a decent figure, though she is far from being as beautiful as Li Xia. To be honest, he wonders how he could have been so blind in his past life to reject Xia. Looking at her now, he finally realizes she is truly stunning, standing out no matter who she is compared to. His driver is already waiting at the gate, but as he heads for the car, Lan Ying blocks his path. She eyes him with curiosity, asking if he is Chun Fan. He simply asks who she is, noting they have no history. Ying gives a slight smirk, mentioning that the school forums are buzzing with rumors about him, rumors that have even reached her school. Naturally, people are saying he isn't someone to be trifled with, especially after the vivid stories of how he handled Wang Yan. Being confronted like this, he finds it rather amusing and doesn't get angry. He calmly asks if her name is Lan Ying, which seems to catch her completely off guard. She asks in shock how he knows her, wondering aloud if he has a crush on her. She claims she isn't interested in that, clutching her chest as if he were about to make an unwanted move just by knowing her name. Watching her narcissistic display, he finds it laughable and asks if her family is too poor to afford a mirror. He offers to give her some money to buy one so she can look at herself properly, dismissing the idea of liking her before walking away with his bag. Ying feels her pride sting at such an insult. She wonders how he can be so rude, insisting to herself that she is actually quite beautiful. He ignores her entirely and gets into the car. Standing there, Ying's expression shifts into a curious smile as she repeats his name. She tells herself she'll remember him for calling her ugly. When Chun Fan arrives home, he finds that Li Xia has finally returned. She had disappeared for several days, and even the dog, Dabai, is acting exceptionally affectionate toward her. He asks if she has finished her busy work. As Xia stands up, he catches a glimpse of her and is struck again by how beautiful she is. He admits he thought she found tutoring him too tedious. To continue, he mentions he tried finding other teachers recently, but none of them were as effective as she is. She starts to explain, but he tells her there is no need. He is just happy she can help him study, and if she has other things to attend to, she should go ahead. He remembers how in his past life, despite how he treated her, she still cared for him and even had her people help settle his affairs. Compared to what he did to her, her being busy for a few days is nothing at all. Hearing his kind words, Xia simply nods in response. Let's head to class, she says, and so we see Chun Fan and Li Xia walk into the study together, where he has a mountain of questions waiting for her. As he works on his assignments, Xia watches him closely from the side. She had seen the rumors online, of course, and was initially quite worried. She wondered if he would be heartbroken, but seeing him now, he seems perfectly fine. The words of comfort she prepared remain unspoken. Suddenly, Xia's phone chirps. She glances at a message from Lan Ying. Even though Xia already agreed to her request, Ying still worries she might back out at the last minute. After all, Xia has always been known for her somewhat casual and unpredictable nature. Xia simply replies with a single "in" to confirm. I have to visit your school this week, she mentions. Chun Fan looks at her with surprise, wondering what business she could possibly have at his school. She explains there is a tennis match being held at the 8th middle school gymnasium. Then I'll go and cheer for you, he says, which earns a small nod from Xia. She remembers how, in the past, he was always trailing behind Lu Rian. Back then, his eyes were fixed only on that one person, seeing no one else. She likely assumed he had never even noticed her existence. But now, hearing him offer his support, a faint, barely perceptible smile touches Xia's lips. The match is scheduled for Thursday afternoon. Long before it even begins, the school is already buzzing with excitement as students whisper amongst themselves. They discuss how the level of the girls' tennis team has always been high. Some mention how beautiful Lan Ying looked when she visited their school recently. Others argue she is nowhere near as stunning as their own school belle, Lu Rian. Rian is the total package, top grades, athletic talent, and undeniable beauty. Naturally, she has a massive following at school. Meanwhile, Lu Jingyan has been in a foul mood for the past few days, feeling quite restless. The revelation that Rian's father is a gambler has been weighing on her mind. Chun Fan, however, just focuses on his books, ignoring the chatter. In his past life, he would have been the first one organizing a crowd to cheer for Rian. Looking back now, such behavior seems utterly ridiculous to him. Because of the rumors about him and an older woman, the other students are busy supporting Rian and don't bother inviting him along. Instead, we hear them discussing whether Li Xia will show up. Xia is a bit of a legend, being the only one who consistently outranks Rian in exams. Her name has left a deep impression on everyone. Most assume she won't come, as she rarely participates in these types of public competitions. To catch even a glimpse of her is considered a rare treat. Hearing them talk so highly of Xia, Lu Rian's expression darkens significantly. She appears quite uncomfortable as the spotlight shifts away from her. Her gaze slowly wanders across the room, filled with a quiet, simmering resentment. When Lu Rian sees Chun Fan so deeply immersed in his books, she can't help but feel a flicker of annoyance. She asks him if all this hard work is actually meaningful. Seeing her suddenly take an interest in his affairs, he simply curls his lip. He tells her it's useful, of course, as he isn't naturally gifted like her and needs the extra time. He wonders why she'd mind his progress. He jokes that since he's already wealthy and handsome, if his grades surpassed hers and Lu Jingyan's, they wouldn't have any reason to live. Rian gives a soft laugh, admitting he has improved, but notes that he has only barely managed to squeeze into the top 200. She warns him that the competition only gets fiercer the higher he goes, and he might just fall back down next time. She isn't afraid of him. To her, his current rank is already a miracle. She doesn't believe he could ever surpass her, even if Li Xia can. She considers Xia a freak of nature with a brain she can't understand, but she believes Chun Fan can't overcome years of academic gaps. Chun Fan simply replies that no one can predict the future. Ruyan, tired of the talk, says she must go prepare for her match. With that, she stands up and leaves the classroom. Meanwhile, Lu Jingyan has been sitting nearby, watching the entire exchange. Her fingers tighten instinctively as she listens to them, yet she forces herself to walk over to him with an air of feigned generosity. She asks if he wants to join them to cheer for Ruyan. Since Chun Fan stopped contacting Ruyan, the flow of gifts has completely dried up. Jingyan feels it's necessary to pull him back into their circle rather than letting the relationship die. To be honest, her motives are purely financial. If he continues to like Ruyan, he will spend money on her, and then Jingyan and Ruyan won't have to live so frugally. Currently, Ruyan is busy with part-time jobs and can barely support herself, let alone treat Jingyan like she used to. Life now is worlds apart from when Chun Fan was providing for them. When he hears Jingyan's suggestion, he refuses immediately. Jingyan asks why, claiming Ruyan is actually quite good to him and often speaks well of him, which, of course, is a blatant lie. She argues that they were all friends once, and there's no need for such tension. Chun Fan looks up and catches her eye. He remembers his past life, where he handed his family business to Ruyan just to marry her. Back then, Jingyan played the same role. She would always act as the mediator, praising Ruyan's character while pretending she wasn't just looking for a free ride from him. Back then, he actually thought Lu Jingyan was a decent person, only to realize later that she was acutely aware of Lu Ruyan's true feelings. She knew Ruyan would never actually love him, but staying with him brought endless benefits. Hearing Jingyan defend her now, Chun Fan isn't buying any of it, noting that even his friendships have a certain threshold for quality. Jingyan pauses, stunned by his bluntness. Others nearby see him refusing to give her any face and try to speak up for her, suggesting that if he doesn't want to go, they should just leave it. With that, they head off to cheer for Ruyan. After finishing his work, we see Chun Fan eventually make his way to the gymnasium himself. Ruyan has already changed into her sportswear and stands before Jingyan, who watches her with a satisfied, upturned smile. The moment he arrives, Ruyan's gaze lands on him, and she asks why he showed up after saying he wouldn't. Jingyan follows her line of sight, spotting Chun Fan as well. He looks at the two of them but ignores them entirely, heading straight toward the spectator, stands to find a good seat. After a brief search, he finally finds a spot in the front row, intentionally keeping a bit of distance from Jingyan and her group. He hasn't seen Li Xia yet, but instead, he runs into Lan Yingying, whom he met a few days ago. She walks right up to him. She demands an apology for the way he scolded her last time. Chun Fan can't help but let out a cold, amused laugh at the request. He asks if she's certain she wasn't the one who provoked him first. To be honest, if she hadn't spoken up then, he never would have bothered with her. He asks who else he should scold, if not someone who enjoys spreading rumors about girls. She claims she was just saying what everyone else says. He counters that if everyone said she was a lesbian, would that make it true? Yingying asks alertly who would say such a thing. Seeing that she actually took his hypothetical seriously, he can't help but smile. Yingying watches him curiously, refusing to drop the subject. She asks if he was asking for her name last time because he liked her. He is speechless, suggesting she clearly didn't look in a mirror when she got home. Yingying then asks who he thinks is prettier, her or Ruyan. Though Ruyan is the school beauty, Yingying feels she isn't far behind. Chun Fan laughs, asking if she's trying to compete. Fearing what he might say next, she quickly interrupts to ask if she has a chance with him. She suggests that since he liked Ruyan so much before, he should try liking her instead, flipping her hair and winking at him for effect. Nearby boys can't help but gasp at her beauty, but Chun Fan has never seen such a greasy display. He ignores her as the gym fills with noise. Suddenly, a loud scream erupts from the crowd. We follow the gaze toward the entrance and see Li Xia walking in, dressed in a pure white team uniform. She is wearing number 11. While everyone had been focused on Lan Yingying just a moment ago, the arrival of Xia causes every eye in the room to instantly shift toward her, as no one expected her to actually show up. Seeing her rival, Yingying stops chatting with Chun Fan and quickly runs over to greet her. Upon seeing Xia, Chun Fan can't help but let a smile spread across his face as he waves enthusiastically at her. Xia maintains a calm, almost indifferent expression when she spots him. Yingying stands quietly by her side, following Xia's gaze. To see Chun Fan waving with such passion, she curls her lip, thinking that perhaps the reason he ignored her was because he has his sights set on Xia. However, she knows Xia has never been interested in men and rarely gives them a second thought. In her mind, he is destined to be disappointed. As Xia and Yingying head off to warm up together, Lu Ruyan doesn't miss Chun Fan's display of affection, seeing him act like a devoted follower. The moment Xia appears, she lets out a cold snort. Lu Jingyan watches her, wondering aloud if Chun Fan has truly fallen for Xia now. In truth, the moment Xia appeared, even Jingyan was momentarily captivated by her undeniable charm. However, she is realistic enough to know that someone like Xia is completely out of her league. Not only is she outstanding in every category, but rumors say her family is incredibly wealthy. There are even whispers that she isn't interested in men at all. Unlike Ruyan, Jingyan won't waste time pining for the impossible. Xia has better grades, a better background, and more money. Jingyan could understand him wanting Rian, but the fact that he is actually aiming for Xia is something she simply cannot comprehend. Rian remains silent, merely stating she is going to warm up. She had assumed he came here to see her, but it turns out he's here to cheer for Xia instead. This realization leaves Rian feeling incredibly frustrated. She once thought she would be the happiest person alive if he ever stopped watching her, as he used to stick to her like glue. But now that he no longer relies on her, she finds the change unbearable. She has always viewed Xia as a formidable rival, a feeling that goes back a long way. During the time she lived with the Chen family, she sensed that Chun Fan's father was planning to arrange a marriage for him, and that girl was Xia. Back then, she comforted herself with the thought that even if Xia was better in every way, the man Xia was meant to marry was her own loyal lapdog. The idea that Xia would end up with someone she looked down upon always brought her a twisted sense of joy. It was her way of finally feeling superior. It was a way to vent her frustrations, but now that Chun Fan's attention has shifted entirely to Xia, Rian feels incredibly uneasy. Meanwhile, Wang Yin is standing by Jingyan's side. We see Chun Fan sitting on the other side of the stands, having bought water for those around him. Among the crowd are boys who previously spoke ill of him. Since they aren't in the same class, such gossip was only natural, really. However, after spending a little time with him, they realize he's actually quite a decent guy. Their gazes soften as they accept his gifts. Rian wonders if he is simply trying to win people over. With Xia present, she assumes he is desperate to show off. Jingyan is shocked, wondering if he actually intends to pursue Xia. To her, the idea seems almost delusional, especially being so public about it. She notes that even Ying was just talking to him. It seems to her that he'll chase anyone who looks decent, and she can't help but sigh. She acknowledges he has the means to do so, as his goal at school clearly isn't just studying. In a way, she finds his situation a bit tragic. She imagines that if he had parents to guide him, things might be different. Wang Yin, however, dismisses this, telling Jingyan she is far too kind-hearted. Nowadays, Wang Yin only dares to mock him behind his back. Soon enough, the women's tennis match officially begins. We watch closely as the match turns intense immediately. Right at the start, both Ying and Rian receive yellow cards in quick succession. The audience is stunned. In any normal situation, players wouldn't start a match with such aggressive, reckless energy. Rian's aggression is fueled by her rivalry with Xia. She is determined to play better just to make Chen Fan notice her again. She tells herself she doesn't have to like him, but he must like her. She wants to prove she is the one truly worth his devotion. But then Ying unexpectedly charges in, targeting her specifically. For Xia, however, this level of competition is effortless. She is far beyond the level of a typical school team. Even though the school standards are high, Xia is simply in a league of her own. After a few points, she begins to dominate with ease. Watching her from the sidelines, we notice her style is completely different from the others. While Rian struggles to find an opening, Xia looks as if she's just out for a casual stroll. It's almost unfair, really. When the first half ends, they head to the rest area right in front of us. Xia sits down, her eyes fixed intently on Ying. She asks why Ying is pushing so hard today, noticing her fixation on Rian. One of the boys remarks that she never used to act this way. Ying tells herself that since she isn't the prettiest, she must work harder to show him her true strength. Xia, however, doesn't take these words to heart. After finishing her water, Ying turns around and spots Chun Fan sitting in the stands. She smiles broadly and shouts out to him, asking what he thinks. She boasts about how she's completely crushing Rian. As she speaks, Xia gives her a look that makes Ying feel a sudden, inexplicable chill down her spine. Compared to Ying's fiery enthusiasm, Chun Fan notices that Xia seems a bit distant toward him. It's a stark contrast, to say the least. While Ying keeps looking his way, Xia remains seated, her gaze fixed elsewhere. It seems her personality is naturally quite cold and reserved. He assumes she simply doesn't like showing off in public. Yet, the more indifferent she acts, the more intrigued he becomes by her quiet nature. With a smirk, he calls out to Xia, complimenting her performance. Ying huffs, hearing him shout Xia's name instead of focusing on her. She wonders if he's just trying to annoy her because of their argument a few days ago. Xia merely glances at the outspoken Ying, remaining silent. As the second half begins, Xia starts playing with a newfound intensity. While the first half was a balanced struggle between Rian and Ying, things change. With Xia stepping up her game, Rian finds herself completely overwhelmed. She has no way to fight back against such a dominant force on the court. The match ends with an absolute victory for Xia's side. Middle school number 8 suffers a crushing defeat, and Rian, naturally, takes it the hardest. We recall the rumors that had always circulated about Xia's talent. It seems those stories weren't exaggerations after all. Rian simply cannot compete with Xia in any category. Watching Xia score the final point, Chen Fan finds himself caught up in the excitement. He realizes he had never truly looked at Xia before or understood her capabilities. Now, he sees just how much he had been missing. He admits to himself that he must have been blind. Meanwhile, Wang Yin and Jingyan's group, who came to cheer for Rian, find themselves speechless. They can't find the words to support a losing side. On Chun Fan's side of the stands, however, the fans are absolutely ecstatic about the victory. Chun Fan is perhaps the most excited of all. He keeps his eyes locked on Xia, even letting out a small, quiet cheer just for her. As soon as the match concludes, Xia walks toward the spectator stands. She stops directly in front of Chun Fan, drawing everyone's attention. The other boys watch in awe as Xia asks him for a bottle of water. Her voice is soft and gentle, like a warm spring breeze. He never imagined someone could be so talented and possess such a moving voice. The boys sitting nearest to her can hardly believe their luck. The boys nearby quickly offer her their water, but Xia ignores them, her eyes fixed on Chun Fan. He eventually realizes he should be the one to hand her a bottle, telling her how incredible she was. His voice is gentle, and those few words are enough to make the corners of Xia's mouth curl into a rare smile. Under his attentive gaze, she takes the bottle. She drinks the water down greedily. Watching this, Ying, who had been so desperate to show off earlier, can only stare with wide, disbelieving eyes. She wonders what on earth is happening. She had worked so hard today, hoping to impress him and win him over, only to find that Xia has completely beaten her to the punch. It's a bit of a shock, to say the least. The most important thing is that Xia has never shown the slightest interest in men. Even during games, she always brings her own water to avoid any contact with the boys. She usually dislikes having anyone close to her, maintaining a strict no-entry zone at school. And yet, here we see her breaking all her own rules. Ying wonders if Xia actually likes him. The very thought leaves Ying stunned. After finishing her water, Xia looks at Chun Fan and tells him she's going to change, suggesting they head home together after school. As Xia turns to walk away, Ying continues to stare, finally finding her voice to ask if the two of them actually know each other. Xia remains perfectly composed. She calmly explains that she is the one pursuing him. Seeing Ying's intense stare, Xia simply asks if she has some sort of problem with that. Ying wouldn't dare have an objection, of course. She is simply reeling from the realization that Chun Fan is the person Xia has set her sights on. Thinking back to the arrogant things she just said in front of Xia, Ying feels like slapping herself. She's mortified, and who could blame her, really? She hurriedly apologizes to Xia, insisting she didn't mean it and had no idea who he was. If she had known, she wouldn't have dared to act that way even if her life depended on it. Xia's expression remains calm as she tells her it doesn't matter, noting that Chun Fan isn't interested in Ying anyway. Ying then asks how far their relationship has progressed. Xia admits he hasn't taken a liking to her yet. Even though she is his tutor, she feels that he hasn't truly opened his heart to her, knowing his feelings for Rian. She suspects she might just be a tool he's using to make Rian jealous. However, as long as she can be useful to him, she doesn't mind. To be honest, she's just happy to be by his side. Hearing Xia's humble admission, Ying can't help but turn back to look at Chun Fan again. He is still standing there in the stands, looking in their direction. Earlier, when he was cheering so earnestly, Ying had assumed he was just another one of Xia's desperate followers. She had no idea the reality was the exact opposite. It turns out Xia is the one doing the chasing. While the people involved remain calm, the onlookers feel like they've just stumbled upon the biggest gossip of the year. The school group chats explode with activity as everyone debates whether Xia is actually interested in Chun Fan. We remember that not long ago, he was the one chasing Rian. Back then, Rian wouldn't even give him the time of day, and he spent every day running errands for her like a servant. My, how the tables have turned. And now, Xia, who outshines Rian in every possible way, has become linked to Chun Fan. Just then, Rian finishes changing and walks out of the gymnasium. She looks exceptionally gloomy at the moment. She lost the match, but more importantly, the person who defeated her did so in such a devastatingly one-sided fashion. Lu Jingyan and Wang Yin follow closely behind her, wanting to offer some comfort, but they are at a loss for words because they are quite frustrated themselves. Just a moment ago, they were certain someone like Xia could never be interested in Chun Fan. Yet, in the blink of an eye, Xia was the one taking the initiative. Jingyan wonders if Xia has lost her mind, questioning how she could possibly like him. He can't help but wonder if she truly knows what kind of person Chun Fan is. With a darkened expression, Jingyan had assumed that no matter how hard Chun Fan tried, Rian would always stay by his side. However, seeing Xia's interest today makes him feel as though he is about to lose his sanity from sheer jealousy. He can't understand why a guy like Chun Fan, even with money, could attract someone like Xia. He wonders if it's simply because they haven't tried hard enough. Meanwhile, the boys who were just standing with Chun Fan turn to him with curious eyes. They ask if he and Xia knew each other before, and when he gives a casual answer, they immediately press him to find out what their current relationship is. They had been standing close enough to see that the way Xia looked at him was anything but ordinary. It was so obvious that they couldn't help but overthink it. After everything that happened with Rian, Chun Fan doesn't dare to be overconfident. He's afraid of accidentally becoming a simp in the eyes of others again. Seeing their concerned faces, he simply explains that their families are acquainted, so they've just been spending more time together lately. They seem impressed by his family's wealth. After waving goodbye to the boys from the other classes, we see that Chun Fan has already returned to the classroom. Everyone is staring at him, of course. He has grown used to their constant fussing. As he sits quietly at his desk, a girl sitting in front of him turns around and stares at him intently. With a voice full of sarcasm, she remarks that while they lost the match, he certainly seems to be in high spirits. She is, as it happens, one of Rian's teammates. Chen Fan simply smiles back, noting that they were the ones who lost, not him, so he sees no reason not to be happy. To be honest, he has a point. She snaps back, asking if he thinks he's special just because Xia likes him. He laughs softly, asking if she's only angry because Xia didn't choose her instead. His retort leaves her speechless, and she shuts her mouth in a huff. A little later, Rian finally returns to the room, flanked by Jing Yin and Wang Yan. As Rian takes her seat, Chun Fan catches a glimpse of her. He can sense that her internal fuse is lit and her anger is about to boil over. She always gets this angry whenever Xia is mentioned. In the past, he would have shared her outrage, but now, he finds the whole situation rather amusing. Rian's gaze falls upon Chen Fan, and seeing the slight curl of his lips, her eyes grow even colder. He seems to be asking her why she's looking at him like that. Deep down, she blames him for not being strong enough to support her. She stares him down, furious that instead of offering comfort after her loss, he is here laughing at her. She has always been incredibly stubborn. In the past, every time she lost a match to Xia, Chun Fan would buy her gifts and rush to coax her out of her bad mood. He used to tell her she was far superior to Xia, but now, he has begun to mock her instead. Just then, the bell for the end of class rings out. Chun Fan quickly gathers his belongings and stands up to leave the classroom. Seeing him depart, Ruyan immediately stands as well, refusing to let him go so easily. She grabs her things and follows him out the door with such speed that even Jingyan can't keep up with her pace. It seems she is on a mission. As he reaches the stairwell, Rian catches up and suddenly grabs his arm. Chun Fan stops and looks at her, feeling a bit surprised by her sudden physical boldness. He asks her what she's making a scene for, but Rian just stares at him with bloodshot eyes. Seeing her in this state, even Chun Fan is momentarily stunned. Suppressing her emotions, Rian asks if he truly intends to be with Xia from now on. Her question catches him off guard, to be quite honest. In the past, she never would have cared about such things, so he wonders what has changed. She looks at him as if he were the one who betrayed her. He reaches out to pry her hand from his wrist, only to find that she is gripping him with surprising strength. He can't help but let out a dry, forced laugh. He reminds her that she used to find his presence unbearable. She once said that every day he spent pestering her felt like a living nightmare. Those were the words she had spoken to him in another life, right before he died. Until she said them, he never realized how much she loathed his affection. Hearing this, Rian is momentarily stunned and claims she never said such a thing. In this timeline, she truly doesn't remember saying it, but he knows better. He knows she hasn't said it yet, but that doesn't mean she hasn't thought it. He sneers, noting that she has always treated him with nothing but disdain. He asks why. If she didn't hate him, she spent every day with Jingyan, giving his gifts away and treating Chen Fan like nothing more than a servant. As he speaks, a few tears escape his eyes. He no longer loves Rian. After everything he's been through, that flame has long since been extinguished. All that remains in his heart is a lingering bitterness. Having lived through it all once, it's impossible for him to love her again, though his past self was different. In his previous life, he spent every moment craving her love and hoping for a shred of affection, only to meet a truly miserable end. It was a tragic cycle. Whenever he recalls those memories, a profound sorrow fills his heart. It is a heavy, overwhelming sadness that he simply cannot suppress, no matter how hard he tries. If he hadn't been given this chance at Rebirth, the version of him abandoned in that cramped rental house would have been truly pitiful. At that thought, Chun Fan's eyes well up with tears. Ruyan watches him closely, noticing the redness in his eyes as she stands before him. Initially, she only confronted him because she couldn't stand seeing him so close to Xia, but now she sees a profound, unprecedented sorrow. She simply never loved him. Her heart belonged to Jingyan. Yet his gaze makes her feel as if she's committed an unforgivable sin against him. He tells her he simply doesn't want to discuss feelings anymore. Yet even now, she is searching for excuses as he wipes away his tears. He notes that she only wants to avoid the topic with him, as she and Jingyan are the ones truly meant for each other, aren't they? He points out that whether he is with Xia or Lan Anying is none of her business, leaving her momentarily speechless and filled with guilt. As the two stand in this tense standoff, Jingyan and Wang Yin arrive, watching them from the top of the stairwell. Jingyan looks on in surprise. From his perspective, the distance between Chun Fan and Ruyan seems uncomfortably close. Ruyan is still clutching Chun Fan's hand, but the moment Jingyan appears, she reflexively lets go as if she's been caught doing something wrong. Seeing her reaction, Chun Fan gives a bitter smile and tells her not to seek him out privately, lest Jingyan misunderstand their situation. Without another word, he turns and walks down the stairs. By the time he reaches the bottom, he has wiped his eyes completely dry. He tells himself there is no reason to cry over a woman like her. That display was merely a way to toy with her emotions. She deceived him so cruelly in his past life, so in this one, he won't let her off easily. He intends to keep her hope dangling. As Chun Fan departs, Jingyan walks down and asks Rian what happened, mentioning that he thought he saw Chun Fan crying. Rian is in no mood to talk and doesn't know how to explain. To her, Chun Fan's attitude proved he still has feelings for her. She convinces herself he only chose Xia because she was too cold to him, thinking perhaps she should have hidden her bond with Jingyan. We see Chun Fan exit the school, only to find Xia waiting quietly for him at the gate, having already changed out of her sportswear. Lan Ying is there as well, and the two of them wait patiently until Ying is the first to spot him approaching. Hearing the commotion, Xia turns toward him. At this moment, the campus is crowded, and everyone seems to be watching her every move. Seeing her on the court was one thing, but seeing her here is quite another, even in the same school uniform. Lan Ying looks a bit plain, while that clean fabric looks absolutely charming on Xia. As Chun Fan approaches, she proactively takes his bag, making it clear she truly cares for him. He isn't chasing her. Xia doesn't seem to care what others think, her gaze fixed on him as she suggests they go eat first. His mood hasn't been dampened by Ruyan. That woman simply isn't worth the trouble. He then notices Lan Ying. He gives her a cold look, and sensing his irritation, Ying immediately tries to offer an apology. There is a clear sense of disdain in the air. Xia glances at Ying as the girl stammers that it was all her fault. He reminds her she was the first to insult him to his face, while she blames the internet rumors for her behavior. She promises to find out who started the rumors. Just then, the Li family car arrives, and Xia ignores her. She opens the door for Chun Fan, standing by the road. Ying watches them get in and waves politely. She tells them she won't disturb them further, wishing them a long life together and many children. Yes, quite the blessing. Xia closes the window and tells him to ignore her, surprised they even knew each other through tennis. Mentioning tennis reminds him of her grace on the court, and he can't help but praise her skills. He tells her she was incredible today, scoring so many points and leaving Ruyan visibly fuming with frustration. Xia accepts the compliment calmly, noting that Ruyan was simply too weak to even be on that court. Hearing her speak so sternly about Ruyan is actually quite amusing to him. It's a side he hasn't seen. Even if she is just stating facts, he finds it interesting. He tells her she is almost too perfect to have flaws. She is beautiful, smart, and athletic. He mentions that all the boys sitting with him today were quite smitten. She simply says she doesn't know them. He knows that, of course, but he's still impressed by her presence. He asks if she's worried that appearing at his school and being so close to him will cause people to gossip. She doesn't care about that at all. We see him offer a faint smile, realizing she likely knew about the rumors surrounding him all along, yet she never once mentioned them. He wonders if she came today specifically to stand up for him. After the driver drops them off at the restaurant, they finally settle in for their meal. Just as they sit down, his phone buzzes with a text. He opens it to find a message from Lu Ruyan, and the content is quite unexpected. It simply says, "I'm sorry." He freezes for a moment. The fact that she is actually apologizing suggests she is truly desperate to keep him away from Xia. Perhaps it's just human nature. Even if she looked down on him before, seeing him move on to someone else has clearly made her anxious. Beside him, Xia asks what he'd like to eat, though he tells her anything is fine. She suggests he take a look at the menu first. Xia orders several dishes, remembering his preference for spicy food. It seems they have become quite accustomed to dining together lately. They have grown very close, though she mentions that Uncle Chun hasn't returned yet and things have been quite busy. This mention of his father leaves him feeling deeply unsettled. In his past life, his father died in a car accident before the college entrance exams, so he is constantly worried. While he focuses on improving his grades, he regrets having so little time with his father. Of course, his father has always been a busy man. Even if he wanted to spend more time together, his father rarely had a moment to spare. Still, he tells himself he is mentally prepared this time. Xia watches him as he chews his food thoughtfully, his eyes fixed on the table while his mind wanders elsewhere. She notices that he often gets lost in thought like this. Her intuition tells her he is hiding a secret, but since he doesn't offer it up, she chooses not to pry. Meanwhile, Ruyan returns home to find her father, Lu Yong, who has been gambling lately. He is waiting in her room with a cold, stern expression. He demands to know how things are going with Chun Fan. When she says, "Nothing much," he snaps, asking why she hasn't won him back yet. Seeing her father like this, Ruyan is speechless. She asks why she must grovel to a man who already fired her. Should she really have to beg? Looking at her father's state, Ruyan actually feels relieved she and Chun Fan broke up. But before she can finish her thought, Lu Yong lunges forward. He slaps her across the face, calling her a brat. He screams that if she doesn't win him back, they'll have no money, then demands whatever cash she has. It's painfully obvious he lost everything gambling again. When she confronts him about it, he tells her to shut up and stay out of his business. He threatens to beat her, comparing her to her mother, and laments that if she had just stayed with Chun Fan, they would have endless money to use. He rants that with Chun Fan's money, his gambling wouldn't even matter, yet she insisted on being with that poor brat instead. After he leaves, Ruyan rushes to the floorboards under her bed, only to find that the money she hidden there is gone. The Lu family home is small, and having lived with her father her whole life, she has never truly had any privacy. There are only so many hiding spots. She had secretly saved the money Chun Fan gave her because she was starting university soon. She knew that once classes began, expenses would pile up, and since her father was unreliable, she had to rely on herself. She never expected him to sniff out her savings. By the time Ruyan walks out, her father has already vanished into the night. Watching his retreating figure, she kicks the wall in a fit of rage. Meanwhile, Chun Fan and Xia finally leave the restaurant. It's raining outside. The Li family driver pulls up to the door and holds an umbrella for Chun Fan as he steps out. Xia takes the umbrella to walk him to his door. He tells her the umbrella is too big and she should head back quickly. She simply looks at him with a gentle gaze and whispers, "Good night." Seeing her eyes sparkling, he feels his face flush slightly. He nods, telling her to get some rest and that he'll see her tomorrow. Xia smiles and returns to the waiting car. Watching her go, he realizes that being with her truly makes him happy. But as the car pulls away, a voice calls out. He hears a familiar voice say his name. Turning around, he sees Rian stepping out from the dark shadows of the street. She has no umbrella, and it's unclear how long she's been waiting. She is completely soaked. He is, understandably, quite surprised. First the apology text, and now this. It seems his little performance earlier that afternoon had quite the impact on her. Rian watches him, noting how the smile he had for Xia vanished the moment he laid eyes on her. His expression is now cold. She asks if being with Xia is really that wonderful. He admits it is. She treats him well, unlike Rian. She then asks if he still loves her. She asks if he could love her like before. Normally, Rian is cold and distant, rarely ever showing such a seemingly soulful, longing expression. He knows her heart is as cold as iron, and that this is likely just an act, yet seeing her like this brings him a strange satisfaction. He tells her no, and asks if she's out of money again, since that's the only time she ever shows him this side of herself. Rian gazes at him with that soulful expression, claiming he's overthinking it and she only wanted to see him. She then turns to leave. She hasn't walked far before we see her collapse. Chen Fan calls for Zhou Shun, who is surprised to find Rian lying there in the rain. He asks what happened to the young lady, but Chen Fan doesn't know. Holding an umbrella, Zhou Shun reaches out to touch her forehead. Her skin is burning. She clearly has a fever. Zhou Shun asks if they should help her, and Chen Fan decides to bring her inside for a doctor. Zhou Shun asks if she should stay in her old room, but Chen Fan suggests the room her father used to use instead. He used to arrange everything for her according to his own high standards, but now, that feels like a waste. To him, she only deserves the staff quarters. Zhou Shun has her moved to the servants' quarters and calls a doctor, who confirms it is just a fever and nothing more serious. Chen Fan stands by the window watching the heavy rain. After finishing his shower, we see him receive a message from Xia. She lets him know she made it home safely. He tells her he just finished bathing, and they exchange their goodnights. After messaging her, he heads to bed. The next morning, Zhou Shun prepares breakfast, and Chen Fan sits down to eat. He asks how Rian is doing. Zhou Shun explains that she woke up near dawn and left immediately, which catches Chen Fan by surprise. He assumed she would still be there. Zhou Shun tried to get her to wait until he woke up, but she simply wouldn't listen. Chen Fan remarks that she's acting strangely again. Zhou Shun notes that Xia is much better for him and suggests he stop seeing Rian. It seems Zhou Shun is worried his master's lovesick brain might return. Hearing this, Chen Fan can't help but laugh. He tells him not to worry. He only helped because he didn't want her dying on his doorstep. Zhou Shun is visibly relieved. Since Chen Fan stopped chasing her, Zhou Shun hasn't had to worry as much. It seems the impulsive young master has truly grown up. Later at school, we see that Rian has already changed clothes and arrived for class. When she sees him, she lowers her head and ignores him. She has returned to her cold, distant self. To be honest, her lack of gratitude after he saved her life is quite something. She clearly thinks he'll go back to being her lapdog. After class, Lu Jingyan arrives to take Rian to a student council meeting. As the two of them walk out together, Lu Jingyan looks at Rian and begins to speak to her about the day's events. Lu Jingyan asks if she is feeling better, and Rian gives him a brief glance, simply stating that she is fine. Rian remains silent. Her mood is still quite dark after her father stole her money yesterday. Seeing her reluctance to speak, Lu Jingyan tells her that if she wants to be friends with Chen Fan again, he would support her. She tells him he's overthinking it. She claims she has no feelings for Chen Fan at all. She's just frustrated seeing him with Xia and doesn't want things to be so easy for them. He assures her that he will support her no matter what. Rian nods, her mind drifting back to her father's schemes. She remembers how he wanted to use her to swindle money from the Chen family, a plan she refuses to take part in. To her, he is a man without limits. She refuses to be used by him for things she doesn't want to do. That is why, the moment she woke up, she left the Chun house immediately. She wanted no further involvement with Chen Fan. For a while after that, she spent every day with Lu Jingyan and stayed out of Chen Fan's sight. Chen Fan didn't mind at all. He focused on his classes and spent his free time scouting real estate, knowing prices were still low. He knew they would skyrocket later. One afternoon, he left school a bit late after finishing some assignments, and the gates were nearly empty. Suddenly, a voice called out to him. Looking up, he saw Lu Yong standing there. He asked if he was there to find Rian. Lu Yong confirmed he was looking for that brat. He admitted he'd been scolding her lately for choosing that Lu fellow over someone better. He told Chen Fan not to be angry with her, but Chen Fan replied he had no reason to be. He noticed Lu Yong looked quite disheveled. Chen Fan frowned at the man's state. Just then, Rian and Lu Jingyan walked out of the school and spotted the two of them together. She marched over, pulled Chen Fan away, and glared at Lu Yong, demanding to know what he was doing there. After he vanished with her money days ago, his return could only mean one thing. He was broke again. Lu Yong just rolled his eyes at her. He told her it was none of her business if he wanted to speak to his son-in-law. Rian snapped back, asking who exactly he was referring to. She turned her anger on Chen Fan, telling him to leave and asking if he really thought he was worthy of being her father's son-in-law. She told him to get lost. Even though he was used to her coldness, her sudden outburst still caught Chen Fan off guard. He stared at her, realizing she always treated him this way. Snapping out of it, he told her she was dreaming and quickly walked away. As Chen Fan walked away, Lu Yong called out to his back, promising that he would make Rian find him in a few days after giving the girl a proper scolding. Rian tried to follow, but her father blocked her path, visibly fuming as he demanded to know what she thought she was doing. He barked at her, complaining that since she wasn't working hard to secure their future, she shouldn't stop him from trying, especially after she had just chased Chen Fan away. We see Rian standing her ground, her face darkening as she pleaded with her father to stop showing up at her school like this. Lu Yong ignored her plea, immediately demanding money, only for Rian to remind him that he had already taken everything she had saved for university. When she asked what he had been doing lately, Lu Yong became agitated. Back when he could control her, he never had to deal with such questions. He hadn't cared if she spent her days with Lu Jingyan before, and to be honest, Chen Fan hadn't seemed to mind much either. But the situation had changed now that Chen Fan was ignoring her, and Lu Yong felt he could no longer tolerate her behavior. He had to take charge. Rian insisted it was her own business and told him to leave so she could get to her part-time job, which only earned her more of his scorn. He mocked her meager wages, telling her she'd be better off coaxing Chen Fan back instead of making him so angry. She simply replied that she didn't like him, which nearly drove Lu Yong to raise a hand to her, though he stopped himself since they were still at school. He threatened to settle things at home, but demanded money immediately, warning her that if she didn't pay up, he would go straight back to Chen Fan. Reluctantly, Rian pulled a few hundred yuan from her pocket, but her father snatched it, complaining that it wasn't nearly enough for his needs. He guilt-tripped her, asking if she really wanted to see his hands chopped off by creditors, and grumbled that she was heartless, just like her mother. Rian's expression remained cold as she told him his fate was no longer her concern, before turning to board a public bus without a second glance. Left behind and furious, Lu Yong looked at the small stack of bills in his hand and cursed his daughter's growing disobedience as he walked away. Meanwhile, Lu Jingyan had been watching the entire scene from the shadows, having decided it was best not to intervene in such a messy family dispute. He only stepped out once they were both gone. He had known Lu Yong was a driver, but he hadn't realized the man was actually Rian's father. It struck him as quite excessive that the man would harass his own daughter for money when she clearly had nothing left to give. Realizing that getting involved would have been incredibly embarrassing for everyone, he waited until the coast was clear before finally heading to his car. It took a good while before Lu Jingyan finally told his driver to go, still finding it rather absurd that Rian had actually dared to snap at him. We returned to the villa where Zhou Shun greeted his young master with a grin, though he quickly noticed the dark cloud hanging over the boy's face. He dismissed the concern, telling Zhou Shun that if Li Xia arrived, she should be sent straight to the study, though she had been running late lately. He had no idea what was keeping her busy, but not long after he went upstairs, Li Xia appeared, prompting Zhou Shun to warn her of the master's mood. Zhou Shun guessed it involved Rian, as only her antics could make him act so cold. To be honest, it was a fairly safe bet at this point. Li Xia headed upstairs and opened the study door to find him staring at the computer, watching a popular comedy sketch from the Spring Festival Gala. He seemed quite focused and was even laughing heartily when Li Xia walked over and took the empty seat beside him, prompting him to look up. He noted her arrival, and she admitted she'd been delayed. We see him realize that she used to arrive early every single day without fail. It seemed she had quite a lot on her plate recently, and when he brought it up, Li Xia simply gave a small, quiet nod of acknowledgement. She assured him that her busy schedule wouldn't affect his tutoring, noting that his grades had improved enough for him to aim for a university in the capital. The question seemed to make Li Xia pause. Her family had been pushing her to leave for some time, yet she had stubbornly remained by his side. She looked at Chen Fan, her gaze lingering as she prepared to speak about the future. In his past life, he had never even considered leaving for another city. Because Rian chose a local school, he had simply stayed right here. In fact, Rian's scores back then were high enough for the country's top universities, yet she had chosen to remain in Yun City instead. He never understood why. Perhaps she couldn't leave home, or perhaps she couldn't leave Lu Jingyan. He never kept secrets from her, unlike her. She never shared her burdens with him, especially after her father passed away. She finally answered that she would likely go to the capital after graduation. He asked if she thought his grades were good enough for a school in the capital, and Li Xia nodded, certain he could do it if he tried. He closed the video and stretched his arms, deciding then and there to work toward that goal, which clearly caught Li Xia by surprise. She asked if he truly wanted to go to the capital, and seeing him regain his confidence, she realized his foul mood had finally lifted. He admitted that Rian had simply annoyed him and began explaining the ridiculous scene at the school gate, finding the irony of it all quite amusing. He complained that even mentioning marriage made Rian snap at him, as if she were terrified of the idea. Clearly, her obsession with Lu Jingyan made her act quite irrationally. He admitted it was his own fault for being so blind in the past, making her feel far more important than she actually was. Li Xia looked at him and softly insisted that he was far too good for her. She assured him he shouldn't even spare her a thought, and when he looked up, he found her staring directly at him with an intensity that made him feel a bit flustered. It took him a moment to regain his composure before he asked if she spoke to everyone that way. She quickly clarified that she wasn't that casual with just anyone. He noted that he must be quite special to her then, a comment that made Li Xia stiffen momentarily. She looked away, suddenly adopting a very serious expression. She reminded him that she had promised Uncle Chun she would take good care of him. Hearing her bring up his father made him feel a sudden wave of disappointment. He found her far too obedient, wondering aloud if she would simply agree to marry anyone her family chose for her. At this, Li Xia looked at him with a deeply complex expression. He quickly told her he was only joking and urged her not to take it so seriously, as her reaction made him feel like he was somehow bullying her. He then asked if there was a boy she actually liked, claiming he was just curious. He pointed out that despite her promise to his father, she should still have her own life. He told her she shouldn't force herself if she had someone else in her heart, but she wondered if spending every day together had finally made him grow tired of her. Her eyes looked genuinely hurt as she announced she was leaving for the day. He tried to explain he wasn't trying to chase her away, but the misunderstanding had already taken root. He called out to her, surprised by her sudden temper, but she didn't stay and walked straight out. Downstairs, Zhou Shen noticed her departure and greeted her. Li Xia simply told him she was heading home, her face clouded with frustration. Zhou Shen bid her a polite farewell as the young master hurried down the stairs. By the time he reached the door, she was already gone. Zhou Shen asked what had happened, and he could only sigh, baffled that a casual conversation had upset her so much. We return to the moment Li Xia told him he was far too good to be bothered by Rian. He had looked at her then, noticing how she was staring directly into his eyes. That gaze had made him feel quite self-conscious, and it took a long while for him to recover his voice and ask if she was always this direct with people. She had insisted she wasn't that type of person, leading him to remark that he must be quite different to her. Li Xia had frozen at those words, unable to meet his eyes. She had fallen back on her serious demeanor, repeating that her only goal was to fulfill the promise she made to his father to look after him properly. The mention of his father had drained the excitement from the conversation. He found her obedience almost frustrating, questioning if she would simply follow any order her family gave her. He wondered if she would even marry a stranger if told to do so. Seeing her pained expression, he told her to relax, as he was only teasing her. He told her that her reaction made him feel like a bully, then curiously asked Li Xia if there was actually a boy she liked. He pointed out that while she promised his father to care for him, she should still have her own life and not force herself if she liked someone else. With hurt in her eyes, she wondered if spending every day together had finally made him grow tired of her, before abruptly announcing she was leaving. He tried to explain he wasn't chasing her away, but she didn't stay. He could only watch her go, surprised by her sudden flash of temper. As she walked out with a clouded expression, Zhou Shen noticed her departure and politely greeted her as she headed home. Zhou Shen bid her a safe journey, just as the young master hurried down the stairs, only to find that Li Xia had already vanished through the door. He sighed that she was angry again over a casual chat, though deep down, he knew that if he were just a bit kinder, she would be completely devoted to him. He insisted he didn't like her that way and wouldn't lead her on. To him, she was someone far too simple to be toyed with. When the thought of pursuing her wealth arose, he dismissed it, thinking of Chun Fan. He realized they simply belonged to two different worlds. Meanwhile, Lu Rian was determined not to be with him, even though she had to admit her life was much easier whenever he was around. Seeing her father's smug attitude only made her more miserable, especially when he claimed her only talent was the good looks he gave her. He boasted that his own grades weren't bad back in the day and scoffed at Qin Qingming, claiming the man only became a boss because of family money. He grumbled that Qin's grades were never that good, while Lu Rian, face dark with frustration, ignored him entirely. She retreated to her room and slammed the door, eventually using tissues to block out her father's endless shouting from the hallway. The next morning at school, we see Lu Rian walk in with visible bruises on her face, a sight that left him completely stunned. Recalling her argument with her father, he wondered if she had been beaten after going home. She simply sat down in silence. The rest of the class fell silent at the sight, and even Lu Jingyan looked startled by the injuries Lu Rian was sporting. She sat there without a word, looking both unlucky and stubborn, unable to stay quiet. He finally asked if her father had hit her. She shot him a cold look and asked if he wanted to play the hero again, mockingly suggesting he could help her if he really wanted to. She told him to give her a few million to pay off her father's gambling debts, promising to be his friend in exchange as she spoke. Her eyes were filled with mockery, as if she were laughing at his stupidity, and it was enough to make anyone's blood boil. He told her he had only asked a simple question. He remarked that asking for millions was quite a leap, and Lu Rian, her face cold, told him that if that was the case, he should mind his own business. She lowered her head. As it turned out, her father hadn't beaten her, but debt collectors had arrived early that morning to cause trouble for him. She had simply been caught in the crossfire and injured. He then told her he truly cared about her, a word that caused Lu Rian's heart to skip a beat. She looked at him, and he let a smirk play on his lips, explaining that he only cared to know if she was doing poorly, because if she was, he could finally relax. He even joked that next time her father hit her, she should let him know so he could go and cheer him on. Lu Rian pulled out her books, her expression darkening. Seeing how far he was pushing things, she finally spoke up, asking if he really thought he could be happy with Li Xia when she was so far out of his league. She insisted Li Xia would never truly look at him. A little later, he changed the subject and asked which university she was planning to attend. In his previous life, both Lu Rian and Lu Jingyan had gone to Yunqing University, but he was still curious why she had suddenly chosen it over the top-tier schools. When she asked why he wanted to know, he simply said he was curious to see where they were going so he could perhaps join them. He suggested that since they all knew each other, being at the same school would be nice, mostly so he could watch and see if their relationship would actually last. Time passed like a shadow across the grass, and amidst the intense preparation, the day of the college entrance exams finally arrived. And just as quickly as it had begun, the ordeal quietly came to an end. He looked back at the familiar school gates one last time, feeling no hesitation, only a sense of absolute clarity about his future. This time, he had fought for himself and turned in a paper he could be proud of. Suddenly, Li Xia's voice, cool yet warm, called out to Chen Fan. We see her standing under the shade of a plane tree, smiling as she asked how he did. He walked over quickly and asked how her own exam went. She guessed he had used the second method they discussed for the final problem, and he confirmed it, noting that her logic had been a perfect fit for him. He felt confident this time. The two shared a smile as a silent understanding flowed between them, a rare moment of peace in the crowded courtyard. Just then, a discordant noise broke the silence. He looked up to see Lu Rian and Lu Jingyan surrounded by a group of their classmates. The atmosphere seemed tense. Lu Rian looked pale with heavy dark circles under her eyes, clearly exhausted by the final stretch of the exams. This final sprint had been incredibly difficult for her. Her father Lu Yong's debt problems were like a skeleton in the closet, and the debt collectors had even caused a scene at the school, pushing her already frayed nerves to the point of collapse. What hurt her even more was Lu Jingyan's behavior during her most vulnerable moments. He had begun to distance himself, whether intentionally or not. The once gentle and refined top student now chose silence or simply changed the subject. At this moment, Lu Jingyan was saying something to Lu Ruyan with a look of purely mechanical comfort. But his body language betrayed his detachment. Lu Ruyan looked at him with a complex gaze, filled with resentment and a hint of self-mocking realization. Chen Fan looked away, his heart no longer stirred by the sight. To him, the love and hatred of his past life now seemed like nothing more than an absurd, self-directed dream. He no longer hated Lu Ruyan, but he felt not a shred of sympathy for her either. Everyone must take responsibility for their own choices. She had chosen to rely on Lu Jingyan while trampling on Chen Fan's sincerity, so she would have to swallow the bitter fruit herself. He told Li Xia they should leave, as his father and Zhou Shun were likely already waiting for them. On the day the exam results were released, the entire city of Yunqing was buzzing with excitement. The biggest news wasn't about Lu Rian or Lu Jingyan, who usually held the top spots, but rather the dark horse who had created a miracle, Chen Fan. With an astonishingly high score, he didn't just exceed expectations. He surpassed Lu Rian and was admitted to a top-tier university in the capital alongside Li Xia. When the news broke, those classmates who had once mocked him as a useless fool were left utterly speechless. In the class group chat, the previous voices of cold irony vanished, replaced by various congratulations and slightly awkward flattery. Wang Yan, to be honest, was the quickest to act, quietly deleting all the rumors she had previously spread about him on the forums. Chen Fan watched the messages, constantly popping up on his phone screen, with a calm heart. He no longer needed this external validation to prove his worth. In this second life, his greatest achievement was regaining his self-respect, seeing people for who they truly were, and having a goal to fight for. Meanwhile, Lu Rian's outcome was quite tragic. The immense family pressure and emotional blows had severely affected her performance during the exams. She had failed to meet her potential. While her score was enough for a decent university, she missed her chance at the elite schools and could no longer follow her original plan of staying with Lu Jingyan. Lu Jingyan, as expected, was admitted to a prestigious school in the north, and after receiving his notice, he tactfully suggested to Lu Rian that they should separate for a while to focus on their studies. To make matters worse, Lu Rian's father, Lu Yong, met with an accident while hiding from his creditors. After being seriously injured and hospitalized, it seemed he would need lifelong care. This man, who once dreamed of using his daughter to climb into high society, finally used his own greed to bury everything he had ever built. Lu Rian eventually took her father and left the heartbreak of Yunqing for a small town where no one knew them. There, she began a life that was truly her own, one filled with hardship, yet completely free from the vanity of her past. Perhaps, in a way, this was the real starting point of her life. After the college entrance exams, during the summer break, Chen Qingming deliberately pushed aside all work to take Chen Fan and Li Xia on a long-distance trip. During this journey, we see that Chen Fan was no longer the willful boy who caused his father constant worry. He had become steady and considerate, taking the lead in planning their routes, while looking after the well-being of both Li Xia and his father. One evening, on a beach in Sanya, the setting sun dyed the surface of the sea a brilliant golden. Red. Chen Qingming watched his son chasing the waves with Li Xia, his eyes filled with a deep sense of relief. He walked over to Chen Fan and patted him on the shoulder, telling him that he knew everything. When asked what he meant, he mentioned the dream Chen Fan must have had. Though he didn't know the details, he could guess the weight of it. He thanked his son for saving him and for saving himself. Chen Fan felt a lump in his throat. It turned out his father had long ago noticed his transformation and had been protecting him with this silent support. Regarding Li Xia, his father gave his full approval, noting she was a good girl with a better judge of character than he ever had. He then presented a graduation gift and a future dowry. He handed over a folder containing the transfer of majority shares in the Chun family's capital-based enterprise, along with the deed to a beautifully renovated traditional courtyard house near the university. In this way, Chen Qingming was telling his son that his future was now in his own hands, and that his father would support his happiness entirely. The final stop of their trip was that very courtyard house. On the terrace, under a starry sky and a cool night breeze, Li Xia leaned against the railing, gazing at the city lights of the capital. Chen Fan walked to her side and draped a shawl over her shoulders. He told her there was something he had owed her for 2 lifetimes, an apology for his past blindness. His voice choked up as he gathered the courage to take her cool hand. He thanked her for being willing to wait for him in this life. He knew that simply saying he liked her wasn't enough, but he hoped for a chance to spend the rest of his life learning how to love her and cherish her just as she had cherished him. He asked her to be his girlfriend. Li Xia didn't answer immediately. Instead, she simply took a step forward and leaned gently into his arms, burying her head against his chest. After a long silence, we hear her voice, which carried a hint of a sob, yet remained incredibly firm. She told Chen Fan that she hadn't just been waiting for him. She had been waiting for herself, waiting to become strong enough to have the strength to walk toward him, no matter who he became. Fortunately, in this life, he had walked toward her much faster than she had ever imagined. Hearing Li Xia's tearful yet resolute words, Chen Fan's entire body stiffened for a moment. Then, with even greater strength, he pulled her into a tight embrace, as if trying to fold this girl, who had waited for him across 2 lifetimes, completely into his very soul. Resting his chin against her soft hair, the bitterness and burning love accumulated over 2 lives surged within him. Tears, without any warning, fell onto her hair. He had lived twice, yet his subconscious only realized at the very end who truly loved him. He had spent half a life in a daze, wasting his passion on the wrong people while leaving this girl, who should have been cherished, to guard a secret devotion all alone. She had waited so long. He called her a little fool, noting that the one who should be feeling lucky was always him. He reached up, his thumb gently wiping away the wet tear tracks on her cheeks. He looked down at the red corners of her eyes, those eyes that were usually so cool and calm. We see him gazing into her eyes, as if smoothing away all the waiting and insecurity of her 2 lifetimes. He told Xia she didn't have to wait anymore. Through all the years and every passing day, he would walk by her side without missing a single step. If she moved forward, he would be there. If she turned around, he would always be right behind her. He owed her 2 lifetimes of devotion and care, and he asked if he could spend the rest of this life slowly paying her back. Li Xia, buried in his arms and hearing the deafening thud of his heart, finally couldn't help but sob aloud. Yet she smiled and nodded vigorously. His hands tightened around her waist. The boy she had waited for so long had finally crossed the regrets of a past life to come running back to her.